Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Yamato was Luffy's girlfriend? Part 2. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, the Gulade J717. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Let's begin this story. Brady, so, what can I do for you? Sanji finally asked Luffy, who sighed dejectedly. At least this time his stint in the floating restaurant didn't happen. Meat. Luffy replied, and anything but pies. Luffy replied after he gave it a thought, making Zoro chuckle at him. Well, anything that would go with booze, and any booze. Wine, sake, beer, rum, Zoro replied. Well, I don't really care. Johnny asked. Ice with peas. Yusaku added. Fruits. Jin replied calmly. Odin or raw salmon. Yamato replied, earning a chuckle from Luffy. Fruits mostly. Nami replied, and Najiko nodded, as she said, same. Grilled fish, and anything but mushrooms, please. Usopp replied, as they exchanged looks. Okay. Give me a few minutes, I am not a machine. Sanji replied to the men before his eyes turned into hearts, right away my angles. But I'm afraid that we don't have any Odin left. Not a problem. Yamato replied calmly, I'll have either raw salmon, or a meat dish. The tall woman replied, as Luffy grinned at her. Her second favorite meal is meat, huh? Right away. Sanji said, as he twirled like a tornado, making Zoro sigh. At least now the arrow cook won't annoy him a lot. So, Zoro, what will you do? Luffy asked his first mate, who shrugged. Did a spar, eventually. He replied in a very dry tone. Jin, what do you think that one Dracula would do? The straw hat wearer asked his helmsman, who just shrugged. I'm not on speaking terms with him, but he's easily the most aloof yet decent of the bunch. Jin replied before he sighed. Hancock does hate all of us, although she does give me a warmer than ice look. Doflamingo is a psychopath, Crocodile is despicable, Kuma is a machine, and finally, Moria is the laziest one I know, and he used to be a rival for Bloody Kaido. Yamato flinched, as she heard the name of her father. Sorry Yamato. It's okay. I have to admit, Luffy's grandpa is interesting to say the least. She said randomly, and Luffy flinched. I think that if an admiral meets us, we'll ask if he was trained by Jai-chan. Luffy asked, and Najiko, Nami, Johnny, Yusaku, and Usopp gave him a terrified glance. He's joking. Zoro said, as he tried to defuse the situation at hand. Speaking of the situation, the same marine. What's his rank again? Anyways, Marinel IEUTENANT full body got in, as the crew, well, the strongest four, acted, as if they didn't even see him. Which it was, since they didn't even need to break a single sweat to defeat someone like him. Luffy especially didn't even need to move an inch. But they didn't to move, as they saw the schmuck picking a fight with Sanji, and once Zoro saw how he spilled Sanji's effort to the ground. Can I cut him? Zoro whispered to Luffy, who shook his head. But then the Straw Hat's captain gave the swordsman a questioning look. Not even Iroquois deserves that. Do you care about him? Luffy asked teasingly. I can appreciate his effort, no more no less. Zoro replied honestly, as Luffy snorted when he saw how Sanji had beaten the man within an inch of his life, before he grabbed him by the neck, and lifted him off the ground. Nice work, Sanji. You're a cool guy. Luffy said to the chef, who ignored him. Angering a sea cook is the absolute death sentence in the sea. Sanji warned the idiot before he released him. Luffy snorted, and knocked him out with his haki. It was so easy he felt almost sorry for nobody. Sanji, can you please give us seconds? This is the best cooking I ever ate. Luffy said, as he grinned at the chef, who was perturbed. Being complimented by a man. I totally agree. Yusaku, and Johnny added. Seconded. Jin added, make that 5. Yamato said. 7. Najiko said, as she pointed to Usopp. 8. Nami replied. Sanji was shocked by that. Zoro finally looked at Sanji with narrow, sharp, intimidating eyes, before he gave him a thumbs up. It was nice to taste something good once again. More on a jury, sake, and meat. Zoro finally spoke, and Luffy's eyes bulged. Zoro never ever complimented Sanji like this. Zoro, are you okay? Is there a doctor here? Luffy yelled at the top of his lungs. Zoro complimenting Sanji. What's next? Nami giving money. The world is ending. Are you going to share your meat? Zoro asked Luffy calmly, as if he read his captain's line of thought. Never. Luffy replied, making the entire restaurant laugh their asses off. See? The world is not ending. Zoro replied calmly. The flustered captain calmed down, as if it was absolutely normal. Sorry for worrying you. Keep eating. Yamato offered to go to the restaurant, as Jin shook his head. Well, his new crew is definitely the best. That was weird. Nami told Najiko, who nodded. Johnny and Yusaku had long accepted that this crew is very abnormal. Usopp muttered, too much. Then they saw the head chef, who was impossible to miss with his ceiling-high chef's hat. And he had a braided mustache which reached his chest. As soon as he saw the broken table, and the broken dishes, and wine, he looked at Sanji, and Luffy, for once, was torn between snitching on a marine, and getting into his chef's good grace, or not acting. Can anyone tell me what happened here? Zeph asked, only for Yamato to sigh, and replied calmly, way too calmly for Luffy's taste. You see, that Marine got embarrassed out of his sheer arrogance and stupidity, then he snapped at Sanji, which made him break the table in two, and Sanji snapped, and my captain did something to knock him out cold. Luffy did all but palm his face. Zoro snickered at this. Oh, he did enjoy this a bit too much. Yamato, I think that your mouth is a weapon of utter chaos and destruction. Luffy reprimanded his log keeper. She gave him a cocked eyebrow, as he remembered something crucial. I didn't mean neither of them. He explained, as he sighed. What are you talking about? Yamato asked, totally ignoring Zeph, who kicked full body awake. You talk a bit too much. Luffy replied, as Zeph grabbed the Marine upside down and shook him down from all of his money. Your big mouth. Huh? Isn't that my power? Yamato asked Luffy, who palmed himself. Meanwhile, Zeph and Sanji were kicking full body in a game of volleyball football, soccer, hybrid, a game which the others found interesting enough, and Nami had a bag of popcorn somehow. No? Why did you? Then again, it won't be that boring at the least. Luffy said sarcastically. Big-mouthed wolf, it's ironically fitting. He added, and Yamato glared at him, ignoring how the Marine lieutenant was kicked by both Sanji and Zeph to his ship while he was holding his ass and screaming profanities. Not even Usopp's thumbs up, Jin's laughter, or even Zoro's scoring it, as 10 would have moved them from their glaring contest. Okay, that's it. Next island, you, me, a fight. Yamato replied in a very threatening tone. Luffy however grinned at her. Why do you always pick me to fight with? He asked, and she blushed at this with embarrassment. Could it be that you two like me? Me? Like a runt like you? No way. Yamato told him, as Luffy snorted. She would only call him runt when she's angry or flustered or, I remember everything. Everything. Luffy grinned at her impishly, and she sweated for a while. I mean, I know that you two always want to spar with the strongest, but still, it's not fair for them, no. Ha. Yamato said, as her face faltered. Was her captain this dumb? Then again, say Luffy, why didn't you marry that snake woman? She asked, and he smirked at her. Not my type. She's kin to cruel and vain. Luffy replied, and Yamato shook her head at him. You, Nami, Robin, Carrot, and Vivi are decent. He whispered the names, and Nami gave him a surprised look. Thanks, Captain, I guess. Nami said, as Luffy shrugged. Say, there's something that I noticed. Would you please tell me if Nami started, as she whispered something into Luffy's ears. The straw-hatted pirate took a huge gulp of air before he screamed at the top of his lungs, rage etched on his face. No, I am not gay. Luffy yelled, as he stomped away with Zoro holding his ribs in laughter, Yamato shaking her head, and Nami was kinda embarrassed, as she tried to follow Luffy to apologize from him. Luffy, wait. I didn't mean it, Nami said, as Luffy went outside before he turned, and caught a bullet just fired, before he glared at one man called Jin. If you would miss again, and shoot my Nakama, mistake or not, I'll rip your guts out. Luffy growled, as there's no other words to describe it, as the man nodded. Sanji, put his food on my tab. He said, and the pirate gave him a thankful look. No one deserves to starve. Luffy whispered loudly enough for Jin to hear before he went outside. As Sanji got out and lit a cigarette, Luffy joined him, much calmer now. Yo? You Sanji, right? Luffy asked the chef, who raised his eyebrow in confusion. If it is you who made the wonderful meat, I want to thank you. Sanji smiled at him kindly, and I want to ask you to join my crew. I refuse the latter, but you're welcome. Sanji replied, as he took another drag only for Luffy to sigh. Don't you have a dream or something? Luffy asked Sanji, who was confused by the sudden subject, and besides, you're a nice guy, so I think that maybe we can sail together. I do have a dream, but look, I absolutely refuse to sail. Sanji replied, as he took another drag only for Luffy to reply. I refuse your refusal. I can see that you have an impossible dream, and that's why I insist on you coming. Luffy replied, making Sanji confused by that. What kind of answers is this? Sanji asked, as his teeth became sharp, then he took a drag from his cigarette, and calmed himself down a bit. Listen, I do have a debt to the old man, so I cannot leave. Sanji said, and Luffy sighed dejectedly. I see, I give up then. Luffy said, as Sanji almost barked at him, but your hand didn't. He said, as Luffy was still grabbing him by his collar's back. Look, I can't. I just can't. I'll talk with the old man about you. Luffy started only for Zeph's voice to reach them. No need for this. If you're going to the New World and beyond, then take this stubborn mule of Lil Eggplant with you. You have my permission to kidnap, knock him out, tie him up, whatever, for his own good. Zeph replied, as Sanji glared at him. I'll never leave before paying my debt off. Sanji barked only for Zeph to snort, as he darted inside, leaving him with Luffy. Kid, what's your dream? Zeph asked, and Luffy grinned at him. To be the Pirate King, and especially to protect my crew until they reach their dream, or be as free as I would be, Luffy replied, as Zeph laughed and smiled at him, or rather, grinned from ear to ear. So, wanna hear about his dream? He asked, and Luffy raised his hand up. No thanks, I already know without him telling me, Luffy said, as his eyes darkened. It made no sense. Unless Zeph just laughed his ass off at the discovery. I heard about this before, but I never thought that it would happen, kid. Are you a time traveler by chance? Zeph asked Luffy, whose eyes widened a bit, or an alien. Or you came from another universe? Luffy took a deep breath to calm down a bit. How did you come to such a conclusion? Luffy asked Zeph, who gave him a shrug. Grand line. He replied, that sea was a paradise. He added, and Luffy snorted at this. Then again, all pirates are never phased for some very obvious reason it seems. Well, I guess that the more you sail the more you realize that the Grand Line is where nothing is crazy enough to shock you. Like anything, and everything can happen. Luffy told Zeph in a totally calm tone. Zeph smirked at him. Oh? So you're not even from paradise? Zeph asked Luffy, who shrugged. You've been in the New World before. Yes, but they don't need to know. Luffy said, as Zeph saw how his eyes darkened. A little too much for a teenager who hasn't been through hell and beyond. They're not like me. I know. Losing your crew can make anyone snap. Zeph said to Luffy, who gave him a raised eyebrow. You have the same look I once had. Let's just agree that this has never happened. Thanks. See you around. Luffy said, as he got in, leaving Zeph remembering his old days. Make sure to train the little eggplant as much as you can. Zeph added, as he remembered his first crew, and especially, his oldest captain. Inside the restaurant, Luffy walked in only to see his crew having fun, to an extent. Zoro, Yamato, and Jin were talking cryptically, with Zoro kinda scolding the two of them. Nami and Najiko were talking about their future, and how they were waiting barely to go back home one last time. Zoro, can you get here in a minute? I need you right now. Luffy told his first mate, who nodded, and shrugged at the others' expressions, captain, and first mate duty. He added, and Zoro scurried, as fast as his body allowed, which made him disappear from most of the eyes, and appear, as if he teleported at the side of his captain. Ignoring the now shocked looks, especially Sanji's, they started their conversation. Okay, what's the hurry, Luffy? Zoro asked his captain, who signed dejectedly. It's about our allies, and friends, and especially, Nakamas. Luffy whispered, and Zoro's eyes whitened comically before his sharp silver eyes narrowed. You mean who will join us this time? And who will we get into an alliance with? And who will we kill? Zoro asked, and noticed Luffy's flinch at the last thought. He sighed, as he added, steel your resolve, and heart. Killing is distasteful. And besides, why should we kill this time? Luffy asked Zoro, who snorted. We'll probably have a bigger crew, so maybe we should get some more powers. Zoro asked his captain, who glared at him. Look, a Loja or two are good, but with our Nakamas, it would be amazing. That's not enough reason for us. Luffy replied mentally, as he decided to change the subject, and now, about our friends and allies. Zoro shrugged. The message was very clear. Not my job, it's yours. Okay, let's start with Vivi. Zoro nodded. Jin. He tilted his head sideways in confusion. The man who Sanji befriended. Zoro shrugged. Mr. 2. Zoro snickered. Some of the Baroque works, and the Sky Islanders. He shrugged. Some of the Ice Ocean's workers. He shrugged. Whitebeard became our first ally. Zoro grinned mischievously at this. But Yonko? Really? What's next? You'll kill Blackbeard yourself? Zoro asked, and Luffy nodded. Not funny. I know. You do know that on second thoughts. As soon as we meet Pinky, Toro, and Jaggy, we'll ask them to be our allies. No. Luffy asked Zoro, who smirked and nodded, and maybe ally ourselves with Kaijin-san. Zoro's eyes whitened upon hearing this. Whitebeard? As in the Whitebeard. What would Shank say? And why? Zoro asked Luffy, who grinned at him. Let's just say that it's kinda temporary. But I'll tell him at the very first call that I'm the one who will be the Pirate King. Luffy said, and Zoro snorted. If Robin was here, she'd tell you that if he wanted to be the Pirate King, he would have been so since decades ago, before we were even born. Zoro told Luffy, who grinned at him. Maybe we'll make some eternal pose for him, and our allies. I mean, why not? Luffy tells Zoro, who snorted. You're looking way too far into the future now. Zoro's declaration made Luffy sigh in nostalgia. Katakuri said the same after we fought last time, Luffy said, as he tapped his fist into his palm. Got it. How about he succeeds, Big Mom? At least he's rational enough, and I doubt his older brother would object to that a lot, Zoro replied, as Luffy grinned at him. Oh, and it's Bonnie, Kid, and Law. I guess that's better. Luffy answered, as Zoro grinned at him. Feel free to act however you want, but if you kill too much, I'll be livid at you. Well, then again, I just don't care about that. Zoro's calm answer made Luffy chuckle. How about we ask the idiot about his take on the Devil Fruits book? Ah, that would work out. Luffy ended their mental conversation. Hockey is the best gift for us. That it is. Zoro said calmly, but they're looking at you like you grew a second head. Not even Jinbe or Yamato can see the future. I know. Luffy nodded after this, as they went back. Sorry for taking this guy away, we had an interesting topic and conversation. Oh? What kind of conversation? Yamato asked, and Luffy shrugged. Zoro however decided to answer, as he grinned smugly. Captains and vice captain only kind of conversation. Zoro replied, if you want to know, tough. But you two didn't say a single word. Nami pointed at them, as Luffy grinned evilly. It was so disturbing, and blood-chilling, how the usually warm guy has such a malevolent grin. I can train you if you all want. Hockey is something that all of you do possess. But let's wait to recruit one more crewmate, then we'll talk long, loud, and clear. Luffy's mischievous eyes made Zoro grin even more savagely. Oh, and Jin, Yamato. You two can access that level with the right training. I decided to focus on that aspect. I'm the weakest at comparing to the other two, I mean, Zoro replied, as they nodded at him. Covering your weakness, huh? Jin asked before he smiled. You're taking your role way too seriously, Zoro. Give him a break, Jin. I mean, I should have known that it's the right thing to do. Yamato said, as she grinned at Luffy. Luffy, can we train? No? This restaurant is the old man's, Zeph's, treasure. I will not mess anyone's treasure. Luffy replied, as Yamato smiled warmly at him. Did I say something? Your words are exactly the same, old man Whitebeards, according to Odin's journal. Yamato said, as Luffy huffed. I know, every man has his own adventure. Hi, Captain. A few days later, half of the crew absolutely wanted to leave, as the food, good as it was expensive, even with Nami getting a discount on hers, and Luffy's food, well, the girls' food was on the house, and some of Luffy's meals, as Zeph saw how quick he was starving, while Zoro drank a couple of times, and even if he did drink as much as he wanted once, to his horror, Nami decided to cut off his drink. Also, they found out that indeed, well, Nami and Najiko were sisters. Nami's immunity wasn't shared, as Najiko got drunk way too easily. Even Luffy was astonished for a while before he remembered how Ace and Sabo were his brothers and all, but blood. That's that it wasn't as rare as I thought it was. If only Sabo regained his memory a bit earlier, Luffy thought. At the same time, both Ace and Sabo sneezed and had the same thought. Luffy is definitely talking about me. Ace thought his tattoo didn't include the crossed out S, since he met Sabo early in Paradise, and Sabo who met Ace and Kinder regained his memory, and right now, he was on his way to Lowtown alongside Dragon. He and Ace had set one of two islands to meet it, Alabasta. And Luffy, as if he felt it, was thinking about Vivi, Cobra, his other friends in the desert island, the old man, his Vivi's childhood friend's father, and his first meeting with Ace. Luffy thought about it for a while before he decided against anything reckless. Would he kidnap Vivi if must be? Maybe not. But he would insist, oh, he would insist a bit too much. His thoughts were cut short by the arrival of one Don Krieg, who begged Sanji for his food. Luffy waited until the very last moment before he pushed Sanji away and caught the pirate admiral's extended arm before he flipped his arm and got him into a chokehold. A one-armed chokehold. What exactly do you think you're doing? Luffy said too calmly. Krieg's mind raced a thousandth of a second. This was exactly like him. What does it look like? Krieg's reply made Luffy tighten his hold on his neck, making his eyes bulge and his face turn reddish. I'm still waiting. Do not try my patience. Luffy warned as he used a burst of his haki to knock him out. And he's out. What a weakling. Jin watched with shock how Luffy knocked his captain with minimal effort. Don Krieg, the supposed strongest, was knocked out without any effort whatsoever. Luffy turned to Jin and grinned at him. You're not like them, Jin. Do you have a dream? Luffy asked the man he's called a demon. When no reply came, Luffy decided to elaborate. Don't you want to see what's lying at the end of the Grand Line? Huh? I want to go back there if I'm honest, Jin replied, as Luffy grinned at him. Then just sit down and wait. I'll kick his ass if I need to, Luffy said, only for Zeph to come back with a large bag. Here. Enough food for 100 men. So, go ahead, defeated ones of the Grand Line. Zeph said, as he glanced at the knocked out Krieg. What happened to your crew? It was a nightmare. A man with the eyes of a hawk had destroyed 49 ships. If it wasn't for a storm, we'd be dead. Jin said, as Zeph shrugged. Maybe because you disturbed his nap. Or because he was bored. Zeph replied, as Jin's eyes widened. Do not mock me. Is that reason enough for a man to destroy 50 ships? Jin asked Zeph, as Jin nodded. Knowing him? Yes. Jin replied, I know that man, and he's always bored out of his mind. Jin was shocked by this. Was this man? Yep, he's the ex-Shichibukai-jin. Our helmsman. Zoro said before he grinned and gripped the Wado as he rushed outside. It's been too long since I fought someone more than worthy. He looked at the two cheap katanas dangling by his side. These would not even stand their clash, but they'll do for now. What are you waiting for, Sanji? Let's go and see with our own eyes the spar between two first-class swordsmen. Luffy told their next chef. Johnny and Yusaku decided to see for themselves, and so did Yamato, Jin, Nami, and Ichiko. While Usopp was terrified, he opted to stand close to his captain. And then, the giant galleon was cut perfectly in half, which made Luffy and Jin grin, as Zoro smirked at the approaching yet still to be visible presence. And then, they saw a coffin-shaped raft, a man sitting in it, and he had some cross on his back. Kakuto, you're... Zoro explained, and was met by 6 surprised sets of eyes, with the 7th being Jin. That blade is the world's best, no need for me to explain. Why did you follow us all the way here? One of Don Krieg's crew screamed at Mihik, who shrugged. You disturbed my nap, and I have a lot of time to kill. Mihik replied calmly, making Jin laugh his ass off at the reply. It was Mihik alright. Is that reason enough to sink us? One of the Krieg's pirates yelled, as Luffy snorted. You were lucky you didn't steal his booze. Zoro replied, as Mihawk almost chuckled, but was content with smiling at the joke, as it was spot on. He wouldn't have cut their fleet in half had they done that, oh no. He would have cut it to shreds, as payback for this offense. You do know about me? Are you a fan or something? Mihawk asked Zoro, as one of the pirates shot him. With unparalleled grace, he unsheathed his sword, and deflected the 2 bullets. I miss? The shooter asked, and Luffy fast-bummed. No, he deflected it with the tip of his sword, Dumbus. Zoro replied calmly. A sword with no grace is no better than an iron bar. Mihawk said, as Zoro smirked at him. Well said. Zoro answered, as he used his Wado to cut a passage through the rubble. You're not from East Blue, or even Paradise, are you? Mihawk asked Zoro, who smirked. How astute of you. I request a spar. Deadly, as it is to me, and even though I'm still too far away from my prime, I really wish to cross swords with you. Zoro said, as Mihawk smirked, and grabbed his Kakuto. I'd like to try this first. Zoro unsheathed his 2-in-ranked katana, which made Mihawk sheath his sword, and unsheath his small pocket knife. I see. Zoro said, as Mihawk nodded. Disrespect for disrespect. Mihawk answered, they wouldn't even withstand our clash anyways. Alright. Onigiri. Zoro said, as he dashed, and clashed the 2 swords, which turned black, to Mihawk's knife. Surprisingly, the 2 swords shattered, making Mihawk grin. Dodgy gears breaking at your grip already. Mihawk stated more than asked. You're not a run-of-the-mill one, I agree. Zoro said, as Mihawk sheathed his small knife, and unsheathed your, good to see you back. Prove me right. Mihawk replied, as both he and Zoro were giving their all to their attacks. Luffy frowned at the sight, as he realized that Mihawk was holding back, and so was Jin. Zoro had realized that for some odd reason, Mihawk was holding back, and tremendously. As the spar went on, Zoro cursed how undergeared and unprepared he was for this. 2 cheap swords. He was practically asking for his own defeat. And defeat he suffered, as Wado was thrown away from his hand, as soon as Mihawk used his small knife in a slash that his opponent avoided, barely, but his left eye though had a long gash over it that would scar. Fortunately for Zoro, this time he avoided losing his eye. This match is over. Mihawk tells Zoro in a gleeful manner. Zoro meanwhile opens his arms widely. What are you doing? A scar on a swordsman's back is the biggest of shames. Zoro answered, as Mihawk grinned at him. Splendid. But he started, as he sheathed both of his blades. I am not interested in taking your life. Go get that eye looked at. You're that disappointed? Zoro asked, as Mihawk shrugged. Nope. Let's meet again in the Grand Line, and have a proper match, with you using some quality gears. Mihawk replied, I was long impressed when you shattered your own blades. Swordsmen of that caliber rarely exist, and I am anticipating our next match. Zoro gave him a shocked look. I don't want to lose the last fun in a dull life. Luffy appeared in a flash, as he gave Zoro's swords back, making Mihawk grin proudly at them. Kid, you have some good nakama with you. Mihawk said, as Jin appeared in front of his captain. Jin, it's been a while. Life is treating you well. Yeah well, I am not as bored as you. Mihawk struggled not to laugh, but at least my crewmate proved himself, and my captain was barely restraining himself. I've seen that. Mihawk replied, well, take care, old friend. This is the kid you said he'll be the pirate king maybe. Mihawk replied, as Luffy grinned at him. But worry not, I will be that after Zoro does win against you. Luffy said, as calmly as possible, making Mihawk chuckle. Looking forward to it. Mihawk told them before he disappeared into the winds. That was interesting. Yamato finally said, breaking the silence of the still-looking dumbfounded group. Zoro meanwhile was applying some disinfectant to his newly gained wound, or, as he called it, badge of honor. As Krieg regained his consciousness, and was raging, Luffy felt a bit too irritated. And in the blink of an eye, the usually happy-looking captain punched the defeated pirate so hard, he dented the armor he wore inwardly too. Boy, wake up. Wake up so I can beat the shit out of you. Luffy then stopped, as he sighed, and walked away. His face was grim. He felt as if he ate an ashtray, cigarette butts, and all. When Sanji confronted him, Luffy gave him a guilt-ridden look full of disgust. Boy, what happened to you? Sanji asked Luffy, who pointed over his shoulder at the now rigid Don Krieg. He's dead. Luffy said as, without another word, went to the Mary, and jumped to his ship with no effort whatsoever. Usopp and Yamato gave each other a questioning look, while Jin's face twisted into a scowl. Zoro meanwhile bandaged his eye, to stop the bleeding for now. Sanji, what happened to Luffy? Zoro asked the chef with a bit of worry in his voice. He underestimated his own strength, and Don Krieg is no longer among us, Sanji said, as Zoro sighed. Killing his opponent wasn't something Luffy would ever do willingly. That was unexpected. He just went to your ship. You mean our ship? Zoro asked Sanji, who gave him a raised eyebrow. Boy, who said I'll join? Sanji argued, as Zoro grinned at him lopsidedly. Oh, you will join. Zoro said with conviction, as he went to comfort his captain. Jin, Yamato, Johnny, Yusaku, Usopp, Nami, Nichiko, waste any idiot who would attack the restaurant. Zoro gave the crew their order before he decided that with his spar gone, and Luffy in turmoil, his priority was at hand. Anyone want to fight? Jin asked, as he took a stance. Please say yes. Yamato asked a bit too sweetly, as she gripped her kanabo tightly. We'll enjoy Johnny's starting beating you all. Yusaku finished. Oh, and you better have something, Nami said, as Nijiko gripped her own rifle, and Usopp his slingshot. Heh, I think that if anyone wants a fight, I'm calling dibs on that, Sanji said, as he lit a cigarette. We're all good, one of the Kriegspires said, as Jin sighed. Eyes, are you going back to the Grand Line? Jin asked, as they all shook their heads. I see. It's been fun until now, Pearl. You're the new captain now. Ha. Me. Pearl asked, as Jin chuckled. He does at least have a good enough head. Yeah, you're the one who had the bright idea of staying here before going into the Grand Line. Take care guys, Jin started only for Sanji to sigh. Patty, Karn, give them our delivery ship, Sanji told the other two chefs who objected, right about now. Alright, you don't have to yell, the two men said, as Sanji took another drag of his cigarette. In the merry-go, Luffy never felt sicker than now. He felt like his guts were reversed, that his heart was gripped tightly, that his lungs were crushed, that he's a true monster. How long will you stay like this, drowning in your self-pity? Zoro asked his captain, who gave him a raised eyebrow. First kill is always the hardest. Do you know about this? Luffy asked Zoro, who snorted. I killed a lot myself, and half to 3/4 of the time. I never intended to end their lives. Being too strong sucks. Zoro told his captain, who sighed dejectedly. Let's get something to eat. Not hungry, Luffy replied, and Zoro felt himself panicking. Boy, you don't pull that on me, Zoro scolded, as Luffy sighed. Look, it happens. Accidents do happen, Zoro said, as Luffy gave him a confused stare. I know that you never intended to take his life, did you? At this, Luffy shook his head. Well, you might have done something wrong, but did you intend to kill anyone? No? Luffy yelled, as Zoro smirked at him. What? Have you seen it? Even you said so. So it was, but a freak accident, Zoro said, as Luffy sighed. Killing is what Luffy said, as Zoro snorted. And leaving them with crushed dreams is less cruel, Zoro asked Luffy, who was about to object before his face twisted even further. I was even more horrified, Luffy replied, as Zoro snorted. You're right. You lost control for a split second, and it was an accident, Zoro said sternly, making Luffy almost snap at him before he calmed himself. If you falter, who can I rely upon? I guess that thinking that you lost your eye made me. Luffy then shut his mouth, as he sighed. I do need a drink. Well, good luck with that, Zoro replied, as the two of them jumped over the rail, then walked to the restaurant, only to see both Jin and Sanji waiting inside the restaurant, and everyone else was long gone. That was weird, Luffy said, as Zoro snorted. Way too weird, Zoro confirmed that. Sanji, do you have any dreams? Luffy asked the chef, who sighed. I wanted to find the all blue, Sanji replied, as he took a sip of his black tea. Luffy raised an eyebrow at this. All blue? That's the third time I've heard about it, Luffy replied, and when Sanji found the eyes of the Straw Hat Pirates giving him a look that was between interest and intrigue, he started to explain. It's every chef's dream to find this mythical ocean, as in it exists all sorts of fish from all over the oceans, all the 4 blues, and the Grand Line. It is said to be somewhere in this world. Sanji then was talking for a solid 20 minutes, with a happy smile on his face, and sometimes grins, as he explained to them everything about that ocean, and how it meant to him, as a chef, and, as a man. Zeph smiled warmly at the scene, as he saw how happy Sanji was. Look at you grinning like a kid. You must be talking about the all blue again, Zeph muttered, as he assembled the other chefs. I think that I found the perfect way to make Lil Eggplant get his ass off this restaurant. Later, the Straw Hat Pirates were blinking owlishly, as they had no idea why the other chefs had occupied all of the tables, making them eat at the ground. While Nami was about to protest, Yamato shook her head at the navigator, who sighed in defeat, and decided not to complain about it. And soon enough, the Straw Hats ate with Sanji. While they did enjoy the blonde chef's soup, the other ones feigned disgust at his soup. Then Zeph barked at them. What are you idiots doing? This is a sea restaurant. We eat everything on our plates. And, as soon as he was done, he threw the empty plate at the ground, breaking the porcelain plate into 1,000 pieces. Are you trying to poison someone with your little eggplant? What is this sludge you serve? Zeph admonished Sanji, who went and grabbed him by the collar. Sludge? What makes my soup any different from yours, huh? Sanji barked, as Zeph punched him, much to the shock of everyone present. Even Zoro winced at the sight. You're 100 years too early to compare our cooking. I cook all over the world, and where did you cook? Zeph's words cut Sanji deeper than any knife. As he was leaving, he saw Luffy gulp the soup in one go. Wanna be our cook? Luffy offered the disgruntled Sanji, who went outside, all while letting himself a cigarette. Pass me a second. Soon all the chefs said in unison, as Nami's eyebrow twitched. So this was not bad. Zoro found himself clapping at the performance, poor as it is, but knowing him. He's listening. That's the problem. Sanji, good as he is, won't listen to reason, Zeph told Luffy, who shrugged. He's stubborn as a mule, and has the personality of a pig, and yet you won't find a better cook, Zeph told Luffy, who nodded at him. That we all agree upon. Sanji's cooking is the best. Luffy replied, as everyone but Zoro nodded, and you Zoro. Well, the perverted cook needs to just get married. That's all he needs to be okay in my book. I hate how he always humiliates himself, Zoro tells Luffy, who gave him a thumb up and a perfect wide grin. You think we'll find him a bride? Nezuko asked, as Luffy smirked and winked at Jin, who snorted. The sea is large, and I'm sure there's a girl who'll love him exactly as he is, for who he is. Luffy replied wisely, he's lucky, unlike me, boy. Yamato yelled at a captain, if you won't stop your self-pity, I will beat 10 tons of dirt off you. You're welcome to try, Yamato. Luffy smirked, as the Oni princess glared at him. Oh, this would be fun. Luffy, stop digging your own grave. Usopp replied, as Yamato smirked. Get a room for two or an island. Zoro muttered under his breath, as Yamato blushed barely, and Luffy huffed in indignation. What you said? Luffy asked Zoro, who shrugged. I wouldn't be surprised if you two schmucks would end up married before you're 18. Zoro muttered, as Yamato flared, and Luffy sighed. As much as he would like to have a strong, iron-willed, and kind wife, he couldn't. Nami and Nezuko snickered, as Usopp and the two ex-bounty hunters and Jin exchanged looks. Would that mean that Zoro knew a bit more than them? After one last cigarette in his room, and many memories of the past, Sanji parted to the going merry, and after kicking both Patty and Karn for trying to ambush him, he bowed to Zeph, as he told him to not catch a cold. Even Zoro smirked, as he waved the old chef off, and Jin. Well, he was a nice bonus to the crew. Alright, now we're 10 plus captain. Luffy said in excitement, as Zoro snorted. He and his captain were normally not included, but he saw how the married became a little too cramped, for now at least. Why are you so excited about that? Zoro asked Luffy, who grinned at him mischievously. I originally planned to get into the Grand Line with a crew of 10. Luffy replied, and Zoro grinned at him. 10 beats 4 any day. Luffy nodded at him, so anything I should know. How about Alvida and our friend Bart? He asked, and Zoro snorted and shook his head. You said it in your own tongue. Our friend. Friend. Zoro emphasized the word, friend. Besides, who knows? The Grand Line is big and wide, so of course they'll recruit more Nakama, much more hopefully. Bet the Sunny will be bigger this time. Luffy said, as Zoro gave him a shocked eye, and saw the dangerous glint in his captain's eye. A glimmer he was too familiar with. Not that again. Zoro complained, first you don't want to kill, then you want to kill, make your mind already. Avoid, as much as possible. After all, what's better? The easy or hard way out? Luffy asked Zoro, who snorted. And they call me the evil one. And they call Robin the scary one. Zoro asked Luffy, who grinned at him. Losing everyone does that, and more, Luffy said darkly, as Zoro sighed. He knew that something broke in his captain. That wasn't a good thing, not at all. Leaving such thoughts for later, when he's better, so he can remember exactly what he came back to. Alright. Onward to Koko. Luffy barked at his team, who smiled at him. No, Luffy, do you have any family? Usopp asked Luffy, who flinched at this, and Yamato, Jin, and Zoro gave him a sympathetic look. I used to have 2 brothers, and some of you met Grandpa. Luffy replied bitterly, the memory of his failures fresh in his mind. One is a good pirate, the other is in the Revolutionary Army. Ace is the first, and Sabo's the second. Luffy then stopped, as he took a deep breath to calm down. You see, it started about 10 years ago, after I met Shanks. Shanks? You mean, the Shanks? Nami asked in wonder, as Luffy shrugged. The one with 3 scars over his eyes, and has bright red hair. That's Shanks. Luffy replied. You mean the Yonko Shanks? Nezuko asked, as Luffy nodded once again. Yonko Shanks. Luffy replied, as he sighed bitterly, the one who lost his arm because of me, and my weakness. Huh? Yamato asked in shock. She never heard this part of the story. Well, maybe you should stop. Zoro replied, as he sighed, we all have our own pasts that we want buried. I absolutely agree with the meathead. Sanji replied, as Zoro glared at him. Whatever. As soon as you find that ocean, I'm selling you for scraps. Zoro replied, as Sanji flinched, my bad. Zoro said genuinely. You didn't know, Sanji replied, and Zoro felt a bit guilty about that. Anyways, Little Me, Ace, and Sabo were tight, more than any trio of brothers ever were, but then, one day, Sabo's dad kidnapped him, and set our entire turf on fire. We barely escaped, and Ace was busy saving me, and dating, and then Sabo was shot down by the worst, scummiest, vilest, most accursed, shittiest cesspool of human waste. They were shocked how Luffy of all people said all these curses, which resulted in both me and Ace thinking that Sabo was dead. Then, a little birdie told me that Ace meets Sabo, and that they each have each other's number, and that Ace would definitely meet me on Paradise. Luffy wasn't mistaken. Last time he did miss Ace on Drum, but met him on Alabasta. Luffy, say no more. Yamato said, as she felt something clench her heart tighter than any death grip of her own father. Thanks. Luffy said, as he took a deep gulp of air, past doesn't matter to me. What matters is who you are. Leave it to you, and your leadership skills. Zoro clapped mentally, as Chibi Luffy grinned mentally. Thanks, Zoro. Luffy replied. Jin, Yamato, I need to ask you 2 things that are very, very, very important. Luffy said, and, as the others gave him some weary eyes, he sighed, I'm really sorry, but I think that there's something between me, Zoro, Jin, and Yamato, that needs to be addressed before it gets out of control. Okay? Whatever, do whatever you want to do, the others replied in unison, as they added, we're secondary it seems. No, you're not. Luffy replied fiercely, it's just that how do I put it? We have known each other for years. Jin replied, as Luffy palmed his face. Oh great. Yamato, please don't. It's that, we do know about hockey, not to brag, but worry not. Yamato-sensei to the rescue. Now Luffy banged his head on the mast. Then he groaned weakly. Nami, hit me. Luffy said in a voice that made him sound 100 years older than he was. Konomi Island. The young pirate crew went back to Nami and Nejico's home village, as they put it, to go check on Zoro's wound, even if he didn't complain. Whatever Luffy told Jin and Yamato, it should have cut them a bit. Not deeply mind you, but Nami noticed how they stole some apologetic glances every now and then from both Luffy and Zoro. While half of the crew were some true meatheads, and the other ones were some goofballs, the two girls were smarter than they showed, especially the older one with her quick thinking. As they anchored the ship, Nami was now remembering how ironic it was that it was a fisherman, and a pirate to boot, that liberated her town. Nejico put a comforting hand on her sister's shoulder. Nami, are you alright? Nejico looked at her sister with great concern, with her pout and her arched down eyebrows. I'm okay, Nami replied while smiling a fake smile. As soon as Nejico sighed, Nami realized how futile it was to lie to her. No. I mean, I just can't put it behind me, we do own Jinbalat. You don't own me, Jack. It was my own idiocy and mistake to spare him that led to all of this. Jin replied firmly yet a bit guiltily. I should have had more faith in Luffy. No, you didn't. Luffy replied angrily before he sighed. His mistake concerning Nami was the first great mistake, a mistake he vowed to avoid repeating at all costs. We should definitely stay here for a day at least, Luffy said calmly, as he sighed. We also do need to hurry up. Lives depended on his success or failure. Luffy, are you okay? Nami asked in concern, as her captain gave her a sad glance. I'll be fine. I'll be fine. Luffy replied reassuringly, as long as we save everyone. Luffy said, as he calmed himself. They sailed early this time, not earlier than they should though. Luffy, we need to spar. Yamato said randomly, and her captain could only nod. He was confused. He didn't know if he needed to hurry up or to slow down. Whatever he needed was he had no idea what, and any confusion would ease up with time hopefully, but she did have to clear his thoughts, with her kanabo, or with her fists, or with I guess a bit of wrestling doesn't harm anyone, does it? Yamato asked Luffy, who nodded again, and, as soon as they landed, the two went somewhere that was empty. What's with these two? Nami asked Zoro, who shrugged. His captain's relationship with Yamato was always odd, way too odd. Are they going to Sanji? Asked Jin, who snorted. Get your head out of the gutter. She said fight, fight. Jin said, as he sighed to calm himself down, they'll find us. How will they? Nejico stopped mid-sentence, as she glanced at Usopp and Sanji, who both nodded. Hockey. Jin said for the rest of the crew. I heard about that once, but its users should be on the Grand Line, no. Mehek, me, Jin, Luffy, and Yamato can use it, though Zeph probably knew about it, but he didn't use it himself, did he? Zoro asked Sanji, who shook his head. I see. Well, training will begin after you two go, and conclude your business. This is your own island, so I don't think that I'll leave the ship. Because you're afraid of losing your location? Johnny asked, as Zoro glared at him. Boy, calm down, Iniki. I mean, you did need us to sail to Luffy, no? Yusaku asked, and Zoro gave them a bloodthirsty smirk. They both flinched, as they realized what that meant. Their training will be much harder than usual. Zoro, will you get your ass off the ship, and go see the doctor already? Nami asked the green-haired man, who sighed, and ripped the bandages off, then slowly opened his eye to reveal that it was healed. I can see that this is the same as the other one. Zoro replied calmly, my eyesight is 20 out of 20 each. Well, that scar makes you more terrifying. Usopp complained. And then Usopp joins the other two. Jin told Sanji, who nodded. I'm sorry, Zoro. Usopp apologizes, as Nami snorted to hide her laughter. Well, lesson number 1, she asked her sister, who giggled. Never ever piss Zoro off. Nejico said, as Zoro smirked at them, and nodded gratefully. I need 2 swords. Zoro grumbled randomly, as Nami smiled at him too sweetly. I can lend you an interest. Nami said, as Zoro made his thought how to yes. Okay fine. I give up. You win. I'll send you the bill, then we'll talk. Zoro told her, as she shook his hand. Deal. She said before she remembered when she agreed to pay for Luffy's and Zoro's food and booze. Why am I feeling like I was deceived or been on the bad end of a bargain? Probably your imagination. Jin offered. Anyways, Nami, Nejico, how about I teach you 2 things? Oh? What is it, Jin? Nejico asked, as the fisherman grinned at them. Karate and Jujutsu, a very special form of these 2 martial arts. Jin's grin was glowing like the sun. Deal. Both Nami and Nejico replied with no hesitation whatsoever, and Jin was never happier. All his life, he wanted to be called Sensei Tohum's dream. Say Nejico, why did you set sail? Zoro asked the older sister, who shrugged. Well, I really want to make sure that Nami realizes her own dream, Nichiko said, as Zoro smirked at her. What? You remind me of my late best friend. That's why I cannot allow Wado to leave my side, ever. Zoro said seriously, and Nami sighed. Like Luffy always keeping his hat. A treasure, like Luffy's hat. Nami asked, and Zoro shrugged. No. His greatest treasure. His crew. Zoro replied seriously, and his family. I see. Nami replied, as she felt something warm in her heart. What an interesting captain I picked up to be my last, Jin said, as Sanji nodded. Say, why does he eat a lot? Sanji asked the swordsman duo his side. Luffy is uberhuman, hence, his stomach doesn't fill as easily as Yusaku began. However, he eats a lot more than what he ate during his journey. If I'd make a wild guess, I'd say that Johnny began only to hear an audible smack. The crew turned to see Zoro's palm on his forehead. That idiot. He's willingly starving himself for our sake. Zoro said, and Sanji's eyes widened. Starve? But he ate like twice in a meal, as we all did. Sanji said, and Zoro sighed. I've seen him hunt giant crocodiles, and eat 9 out of 10. You were practically giving him less than a meal. He's just suppressing his hunger, barely. Zoro replied, the scrawniest thing he ate in one sitting weighs at the very least. A ton. Oh shit. Sanji cursed, as he was horrified. Luffy was starving all this time. For the sake of his crew. I'd say we feed him enough tonight, so he can get some fat, Nami said, making Zoro snort. But, damn, look. Zoro said, he never kept his fat for more than 10 minutes. That's a problem. Do you have any ideas? Jin asked, and Zoro stroked his chin before he grinned. Not my problem. And they all face-fulled. With Luffy and Yamato. The Gomu user was distracted by how his crew was still in the ship, and Yamato. She used that moment to tackle him, and Kinda pinned him firmly to the ground, with her sitting over him. He blinked as he sighed. It was his loss this time. Fine, I yield. You win. You can let go now. Luffy told Yamato, who grinned at him. Yamato. I'm sorry Captain, and now that I've got you, I will never let you go. Yamato practically singed at him, making his eyes widen at a comical proportion, and his jaw slacked before she released him, bear hugging him hard enough to make sure he couldn't move, and gave him a fierce yet surprisingly warm stare. It was at that moment that Luffy realized that Yamato was special. She kissed him on both cheeks before she grinned at him. Luffy's eyes widened before he realized what it meant. Garp once know, last time he came here, gave him the talk, a very long talk about the talk. Do you like me? Luffy asked Yamato, who grinned at him. How can I not? Yamato said before she walked with her captain restrained in her vice grip, bear hugged like a small doll, yet she was able to carry him like that all the way to the ship. Sanji started cursing until Zoro grabbed him and yanked him back. Usopp's eyes widened, Jin's eyes bulged, both Nami and Nichiko blushed, Johnny and Yusaku blinked owlishly, Jin and Zoro were unaffected. Oi, Yamato. Let go now. They will think that we're a couple. Luffy warned, and the Oni princess shrugged. Well, I don't really care. I won, and I carried you here so you can be restrained. The winner carries the LOSCR, Yamato said, if teasingly. Luffy grumbled something under his breath before he gave up. After a few curses from Sanji, and his attempt of hitting Luffy being cut short by Jin of all people, Luffy smiled at his crew, before he took a good gulp of air. Alright. Now then, after we'll go to Loketown, we'll go to the Grand Line. Luffy said, as he and Zoro added mentally, once again. With Yamato and Jin smiling with anticipation. Okay, Nami, Nichiko, it's your last day here for a very long while, so yeah. Luffy said, as both girls nodded at him with Zoro deciding about something, and Sanji not far behind. Okay, I'll go see the doctor. Zoro said calmly. I'll come with you, and I need to pick up some supplies for Sanji, then give Luffy a regretful glance with Zoro fuming at Sanji's presence. Luffy nodded, as he decided to tell the others one thing. Wait here. Catch as many fish as you can. I'll bring everything else. Luffy said seriously, as Jin, Yamato, Usopp, Jin, Johnny, and Yusaku saluted him. Next island will be Loketown, where we can all disembark. This brought their morale up tremendously. They understood that Zoro would go to check on his injuries, Sanji to get the supplies, and Luffy would definitely enjoy the extra workout. Nami and Nichiko meanwhile. Luffy tapped his chin, as he felt that he did forget something important, but he shrugged. Whatever it is, it wasn't on this island. The next day, where is that witch? Zoro grumbled, as he dodged Sanji's kick before he retaliated with a hockey-enhanced finger flick. I swear, yesterday, Zoro, I think that she wants to do the dash and smash trick. Nichiko whispered, making the swordsman smile in nostalgia, with Luffy doing the exact same. Everyone from the island was there when Nami appeared. Set sails. Nami yelled, as Luffy smirked when the crew was confused. Do, as she says. Luffy ordered, as he gripped the harbor's pier with his carbon-crushing hands. He waited until his instincts told him that they were ready. Zoro had lifted the anchor, Usopp and Jin unfurled the sails, yet they didn't budge an inch. Luffy watched Nami carefully when she was 10 meters away. He let go, as he prepared his other hand. When she jumped in the air, he pulled her, and Yamato caught her easily. Nami lifted her shirt, only for the wallets of the island's inhabitants, to tell how she's still an unrepentant thief. She stuck out her tongue and waved at them, Luffy smirking, as he and Zoro exploded at a fit of laughter, and soon even Jin had joined their laughter right after Jin, who was the very last to laugh his ass off. You never get bored here, Luffy tells Zoro, who shot him a knowing look, and nods firmly. Oh, this would be hilarious. No, it was hilarious already. Nami had done the exact same thing. This time, they had no bounty on them, but Jin's, Luffy, and Zoro had nothing on their names yet. And then, when Nami got the newspapers, she was shocked by the article that says that Luffy. Nami yelled at her captain, who was lifting weights twice as heavy as Zoro's. He immediately rushed at her side when he heard her scream, Nami. Hoo-ha. Luffy was panicking when he saw Nami pointing at an article. Luffy, are you okay? Nami asked her captain, who signed dejectedly. No, I am not. I must save a whale, then a duel, and then a reindeer, then a country, then an entire race, then an entire island, and before that a horse, I guess. And also tell a 50 years old message. Luffy said, as Nami blinked owlishly at him. Ha. Are you lying? Tell me any lies. Nami asked Luffy, his eyes tuned with his puckered up lips to the side, and he said, Sanji's food is not tasty. Luffy replied, as Nami laughed a bit. Was he for real? Okay, that, I can keep it a secret, or tell, your choice. Nami said, as Luffy sighed. Pretend we never talked about this. Luffy said in a sad tone, lives depends on this. Well, since you don't seem full of lies, how can I say no? Nami replied, as Luffy sighed, but you'll tell me everything one day. If we make it near the end of paradise, I will spill the beans, and the entire canned food. Luffy replied, as he tried to joke, which Nami found pretty funny, judging by her chuckle. Anyways, what did you need me for? Luffy had seen the 2 bounties, and the article before he exploded in a fit of laughter. And he smirked at Nami before he nodded. Yep. It was a disaster that my dear older brother Ace did avoid. Roasted hippo sounds delicious, Luffy replied, as Nami gained a tick mark. Look, you're the first who'll know everything, I swear. Don't swear. You're much more charming that way. Nami warned, as Luffy raised an eyebrow. No. I didn't mean it like that. You're my best friend, well, apart from Yamato, that's it. Good to know you two got along pretty well, Luffy replied, as he thought about a blue-haired princess, and a dark-haired archaeologist, and a blonde rabbit. His eyes darkened. You do have bad nightmares. Can I listen? Nami asked, and Luffy took a deep breath that he exhaled from his nose. No, it's my, and Zoro's burden. Luffy replied, as Nami gave him a raised eyebrow. There are things you, Usopp, and Nezuko can do that none of us can. Distance. Nami replied, and Luffy grinned at her. See? Anyways, I told Usopp about something, and he'll be here in less than 10 seconds. Luffy said, as Nami counted. As soon as she reached 9, Usopp arrived. Okay, Luffy told me that you need a new weapon. Care to elaborate? Usopp asked Nami, who gave Luffy a shocked look. He just smiled at her, and went back to his training. But not before he glanced at Nami. Wanna join? He asked her, as she shrugged. Suit yourself. Luffy, is it true that your true treasure is us? Nami's random question made Luffy stop, as he almost tripped and fell, but he caught himself. Yes. He replied heavily, as he decided to just go away. Maybe training can wait. He now felt tired. Too tired all of a sudden. Luffy. Zoro asked his captain, who went to the men's quarter, and decided to just take a nap. Nami. I asked him about his true treasure, and he confirmed that it was us. She replied only for Zoro to palm his face. What did I say wrong? Nami asked her crewmate, who signed dejectedly. Nami, Luffy is afraid of only one thing. Wanna guess what? Zoro asked her, and she shrugged. Nothing. No? He's afraid of losing us. Zoro spelled it, and Nami's eyes widened. Anyways, I will explain everything, later of course, if you do me a small favor. Which is? She asked incredulously. An interest-free debt for Luffy. He asked a bit after contemplating. After hurting him. It's on me. Nami replied, as Zoro nodded at her gratefully. If I owe you one favor. Arg. Fine. But then again, I think that I know where the mythical city of gold exists, Zoro replied, and waited. Really? Nami asked, as her eyes took what only could be described as berry shape. Zoro smirked. Hook, line, and sinker. Luffy would tell you one day, Zoro replied, but let me warn you. Actually, remember Usopp's lies? Yeah? She asked, and Zoro smirked. They're all true on the Grand Line. Zoro's answer made Nami's, and Usopp's jaws hit the floor. I think that I caught the deadly disease that's called, I can't go theraistis. Usopp replied, as tears and snot dripped from his eyes and nose. Zoro glared at him, making him flinch. If you ever leave this crew, for any reason that's not excusable, I will cut you down myself, are we clear? Zoro used a burst of his king's haki, as Nami felt the terrifying presence only for Luffy and Yamato to materialize at the swordsman's side. Zoro. They both scolded, and he scoffed. You two have it. He accused them of shark teeth. What's rule number 3? Luffy asked, and he sighed. I'm sorry for scaring you, Usopp. But really, never leave this crew, or you won't get back. Zoro said, and, as Yamato gave him an incredulous look, and Luffy a shocked one, he added, Luffy, we all know how you are, but leaving a pirate crew is a death sentence. Depends on the captain. Yamato replied, and Zoro snorted. Only Whitebeard, and I mean the Whitebeard, is similar to Luffy. Zoro replied, and they all gave him a shocked look. I don't even have to lie. Figured as much. Sanji added, that old man knew Whitebeard in his youth, and he told me that I won't find a better captain than our rubber-brained schmuck, who should eat until he feels satisfied from now on. You're the best, Sanji. Luffy thanked his chef. I knew that you're a good person deep down. One condition. You do not tend your hand at anyone else's plate. Sanji replied, I will give you your cut. Deal. Luffy's answer made Zoro's eyes whiten. That was too quick. He replied, as his eyes had shark teeth, and his eyes were white with indignation. Logtown, okay, team formation. Jin said to Luffy, who nodded. Team 1, Usopp, Jin, Sanji, and Jin. Seeing as none of you have a weapon to buy. Luffy said, as they nodded. Team 2. Yamato, Nami, and Ichiko. Seeing as you do have some gears and clothes to buy, Nami. We need a den mushi, not a baby one. I was waiting so long for these calls. Luffy got out a paper. Team 3, Johnny, Yusaku, Zoro, and me. Luffy said, as Nami raised her hand. Yes. Why did you divide us into teams? Nami asked, as Luffy grinned. Easy. In each team, there's a hockey user, and let's just say that I'm calling dibs on the captain of the Marines. Luffy replied, as Nami felt a bit better, and Johnny and Yusaku needed some weapons, and so did I. Ha. 9 states were looking at him. Correction, 10 dumbfounded states were looking at him, as Zoro was the last to give him a dumbfounded look. I have to become stronger, Luffy replied, and Zoro smirked at him. Well, let's hope that no sword would break in my grip. Zoro said, as Luffy chuckled. That's not a funny gag. Anyways, Yamato got us the 2 gears we have, and Nami, listened to her crash course navigation on the Grand Line. Yamato gave her captain a mock salute, and Nami was about to say something, only for Luffy to nod. And once again, he nodded at her. How? She asked, and Yamato chuckled. Hockey. She replied, as if it explained everything. Alright, let's move out. Luffy said, as they went all on their separate ways. No, Luffy dragged Zoro to the arms shop. Team 1, Jin, Sanji, Usopp, and Jin walked together. As the 4 men walked in perfect silence, some marines and bounty hunters tried their luck at capturing Jin and Jin. Turned out that they had rotten luck, as Sanji observed how efficiently and quickly Jin dispatched them with his dual tonfas, and how Jin just punched the air, and then they flew away. That's what I call a power move, Sanji commented, as Jin smiled at him. Sanji, I think that we should pick up as much food as possible. After all, we have a monster to feed, Jin, and Sanji sighed. Well, Luffy never ate as much as he wanted to. He was respectful enough to not steal from his crew's plates, making Sanji's respect for his captain skyrocket upon seeing how he was starving for his crew, and hence, he made sure to feed him with more than enough meals. Well, that, and Luffy was something else. As whenever the chef wasn't busy, Luffy told him about a mystery power called Haki, and something that Sanji would enjoy. He tried to put his hand on it. Sanji, can you please wait for me? It'll take a few minutes. Usopp asked his friend to wait for him, breaking their silence. And soon enough, Sanji nodded, as Usopp got in, and after a few minutes, he got out with the goggles, as one Daddy Materson was intimidated by Jin, who reassured him that he's not invading the island. Okay, so you wanted some new goggles. Fair enough. Sanji commented, as Jin shrugged, and Jin smiled at them. Say Jin, do you have anything to buy? Jin asked their newest member. No? But you might want to get Jin to try to get his mind on it, only for Jin to reply. Log pose. I know, Jin replied, as Jin's eyes widened a bit. We got it. Shall we tell Nami Swan? Sanji asked, and Jin shook his head. That's Yamato's responsibility, no? Jin asked. Anyways, Jin, lead the way to the marketplace. I don't know. I never set foot here, Jin admitted, and Usopp sighed. Are you the only sane man in your crew? Jin asked with his bulged out eyes, and Jin sighed, but nodded sadly. Well, at least there's someone sane here, I'd say. Usopp pointed at Sanji, who was twirling around, as he saw every beautiful lady in the town. Fine. I'll follow the schmuck. Jin replied, as Jin and Usopp stifled their laughter. You two want to go back to the ship probably. Fine with me. Usopp said only to Kin to find someone. Team 2. The entire trip to the clothing store, Yamato was talking non-stop to Nami and Ichiko about the Grand Line, the islands, the navigation there, especially the log pose, and how it's called paradise. Well, the first half at least. Also, she told them about the devil fruits, and how there's some which are, well, terrifyingly strong. Hers, for example, is a mythical zone, and it allows her to even use ice. Both girls were shocked, as they had never seen any devil fruit user. She told them that she and Luffy can't swim, and that they rely on Jin to save them if they fall on the water. Does Luffy have a devil fruit? Nami asked in total shock. Why didn't he use it then? Nichiko added. Well, he didn't want to use it because it's not necessary here, his words not mine. Yamato replied, and well, it was because he almost mastered it. Not that they needed to learn about that. He ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi, which allows him to become like rubber, and he almost awakens it. Awake? Nami asked, too interested now. There's another level for the devil fruit users called Awakening. It makes their abilities on an entirely another level. Yamato answered, as she smirked, when will Luffy achieve it, and when I hopefully reach that level? Well, it's entirely another story. Ha. The two girls answered with shock, but there must be a weakness. No. Depends on the fruit and the user. Yamato replied, but sea stone and water, well, any devil fruit user will drown, like they become immobilized in water, no matter their strength. Count me out. Nijiko said, and Nami sighed. I don't know. I mean, Luffy, how strong is he? Nami asked, and Yamato snorted. Bojas, the so-called strongest devil fruits. Most of them will lose to him because his haki is almost top level, at the very least. Yamato said, as she thought about it, my Kenbushuko isn't at that level, but my Busashoku is something I focused on because I needed to be free. Yamato replied seriously. Her face was grim. Anyways, it's a story for another day, please. Let's go get some clothes, for us and the others. How many for them? Nami asked, and Yamato smirked at her. Luffy has no sense of fashion. She told Nami, and both sisters almost spat, but then, they laughed their asses off. Anyways, let's get going, and I'm counting on you. Fine, go get the Den Mushi for Luffy. Nami said, as Yamato grinned at her. Ace already gave Jin the number for the device, and also Luffy have on him the numbers of Ace, and Shanks, and probably Garp. Okay, I think this is it. Give me a minute. Yamato said, as she got in, asked the clerk, then got out of the store. Nami, bargain time. Nijiko, please wait here with Yamato. Nami asked her sister, who nodded. A few minutes later, she got out, carrying a huge, even in Yamato's large hands, snail. That's it, Yamato said, and Nami nodded. It's cheap. Nami said, as she grinned while Nijiko laughed. Her sister never changed one bit. Girls, let's go buy some clothes. Nijiko said, as Nami smirked. Well, she was there to the rescue. Team 3. Luffy was amazed how Zoro, Johnny, and Yusaku had found this story easier than he could have guessed. Then, before they got in, Zoro told them one thing. If we do meet a marine, do not call me by my name. The swordsman said seriously, if you do, well Luffy, I'll throw you into the ocean, and you two will know exactly why I don't want to use any sword. He means to beat the hell out of you two, which is bad. Luffy warned, we do spar regularly, and it is not a good thing. Luffy answered, so, Zoro, is there any weapon you would recommend to me? What weapon would you use? Zoro asked Luffy, who grinned. The pipe. Luffy replied, and Zoro smirked. Power, and practicality against all else. A machete. Zoro replied, and since we'll get in, I'll see what I can hold on. We are not wanted, so you can do whatever you want. Should I go see the execution's platform? Luffy asked Zoro, who shrugged. As long as you don't get caught. Yes. Zoro barked, as they got in, with a sulking Luffy. Hey, storekeeper-san, I'd like to get 2 swords. Zoro said, as the man was disinterested. Whatever, you can all help yourself. Wait a minute. The man, Iponsu, who was a middle-aged, balding man with a reddish nose, was now looking at Zoro's sword. Say, how about I buy that sword from you? Sorry, not even for a trillion berry. It is not mine to sell. Zoro replied calmly, and the man was about to say something only for Luffy to glance at him. Look, that sword is this man's treasure. Can't you see? Luffy said, a man would never sell his treasure, or he's dead. That was pretty wise of you. Zoro replied, as he clapped. So, you do have some pipes? Zoro asked the man who snorted. What do I look like? The hardware store. This is a weapons store. Weapons. I sell weapons here, not hardware. The man almost exploded, as Luffy sighed. Fine. Can you give me a knife book? Luffy asked, as the man snorted. You mean catalog? He asked, and Luffy scratched his head. I don't know kata book. Luffy asked, and Zoro snorted. There. You can seek whatever feels natural. The man grumbled at the weird kid. Okay. Luffy said merrily. And soon enough, he was busy looking at the different knives. From the smallest of daggers, all the way to the largest of cleavers. Excuse me, can you return my sword, Shigure, that I sent you for sharpening and cleaning? A female voice reached their ears, and Luffy ignored everything, as he found 2 natural-feeling knives. Seasen, do these 3 feel natural to you? Luffy asked, as the man's eyes widened. The knives in question were on the scrap barrel, yet how? These are normally cheap, who put them there? Oh, my last helper. Damn that clumsy idiot. Then again, you get the help that you ask for. He grumbled. Say, how about I sell you these 2 for 14,000? Yes. Not a single bear more. Luffy put his foot down. Well, he said the number randomly. It was exactly the right number. A machete with a saw on its backside, and 2 knives that had an edge on the back. The machete was made from a stronger than usual metal, and it had a sheath. As for the 2 knives, well, they were made from the same metal Frankie used to bolt the latest invention, which was not cheap. The man screamed in rage. This was his worst loss ever. Not even if he did give the sword for free, would you lose as much. Oh? The cursed sword. Zoro said enthusiastically. I love it. Zoro gripped the Sandai Kitetsu, and gave it a good swing. It didn't break. Welcome with me, Sandai-kun. Ha. You know the Sandai Kitetsu. Tashigi asked Zoro, who smirked. I heard about it. The cursed blade that causes the unworthy to die, huh? Zoro smirked. Now, where do I find a third blade? 3 swords. You remind me of Verano Zoro. Tashigi said. I heard that name a lot. Zoro said calmly. Men like him, using their swords for evil swords, have a conscience of their own. Tashigi said. How does he use it for evil? Zoro asked, a bit calmer. Bounty hunting. Swords are made to protect and defend, not to earn money or loot. Tashigi replied, and Zoro smirked. One day, I'll liberate these swords. These 2 are included. Zoro asked, and she shook her head. Nah, you're not evil looking. Tashigi said, and Zoro smirked when the store clerk was panicking. My good son, leave that sword. It's cursed. It can kill you. He said, and Zoro smirked. How about I test my luck against it? He said, as he threw the sword and tended his arm while he closed his eyes. Luffy was about to intervene, only to hold both Johnny and Yusaku. Everyone held their breaths as the sword descended, as 4 were panicking, and Luffy was calmly waiting only for the sword to miss Zoro's arm completely. Tashigi fell to her knees, Ippon released a sigh, and Johnny and Yusaku did the same. Nice. You're the same it seems. Luffy said with a grin, as Zoro smirked at him. Ippon immediately got the Yubashiri, as it was the very best sword he had in his store. Johnny and Yusaku chose a Ripper and a Saber respectively, and had to pay each enough money to be in Nami's debt, making Luffy chuckle, as the money he paid was the maximum allowed. Well, good luck you two to get rid of your debt. Luffy teased, as they both gulped. When you 2 are done, we'll be waiting. Luffy said, as he almost called Zoro by his name. Boy. Zoro said, as they chuckled at his expanse. Tashigi, are you planning to fight every pirate with a renowned sword? When she nodded, he sighed, pick your opponents wisely, I don't want to hear that I wouldn't okay. She snapped at him, and he smirked, you're strong. She said, probably stronger than even Captain Smoker. Oh? Who knows? I mean, the only time I wasn't bored, I got this scar, from one Dracula he stopped, but yeah, there's a lot more monsters than there should be, okay? She asked, as she tried to think what to say about a man who faced the world's strongest, and lived, with a very small scar to boot. Luckily it was a flesh wound, not an eye. Zoro said warningly. But please, be careful, okay? She replied, also, what will you do? She asked, as he shrugged. Live, and walk the earth, sail the ocean till we meet again. He replied, as he went outside, and disappeared. His friends were with him, but Tashigi couldn't follow them. What an interesting fellow. She said to herself. Team 1, the 4 men walked, as they carried what Sanji bought, which was a lot of food. Then, they bumped into Yamato, and the 2 sisters. Nami stopped before she narrowed her eyes. Yamato, please take all the clothes, and you 4. Let's hurry up to the ship. There's a strong storm that will arrive soon. Nami said, as they gave her a questioning look. Let's hurry up. I'll be back for Luffy, and the others. Yamato said, as Jin nodded. And, as they went to the ship, they bumped into Johnny, and Yusaku. Oh? Where's Luffy, and Zoro? Nijiko asked, and they sighed. Luffy went to buy a pipe, and Zoro went with him. It cost Luffy and Nikki about 14,000 Johnny began, and Zoro and Nikki got it all for free. Yusaku said to the now fuming Nami. Arg. I should have seen that coming. This is the second time they scam me. Nami said before she stopped, but the pipe cost more than $6,000. I bet not even Luffy would be able to get it that cheap. Yamato sighed. Nami had asked for it. Nijiko shook her head. Alright, I'll escort you, then I'm off to get the other 2, is that okay? Yamato asked, and they nodded. Good to hear. Meanwhile, you sure are lucky today, Luffy. We have about 5,000. How about we go to this restaurant? Zoro asked his captain, who grinned once he realized that Buggy was around, and he would get into the very same restaurant. Let's go. Eat, and drink to your heart's content. A friend will pay for us. Luffy winked, and Zoro smirked at that. And true to their words, Buggy and his crew got inside right after Luffy had a good meal of not-so-cheap food. Zoro and he drank a bit to their heart's content as they started to converse. Okay, what about our friend Bart? Zoro asked Luffy, who grinned at him. We'll convince him to sail, maybe. Albedo would like him. He asked, and Zoro chuckled. Oh boy, I don't want to know. Zoro said, as Luffy's hand disappeared, as he stole a few coins from Buggy's bag. I'm sorry about this. Luffy said, as Buggy continued to eat. Moji did the same. The 2 men paid before they walked, and patted him on his shoulder. You're a good man. Luffy said, as he went outside, followed by Zoro, who patted him on his shoulder. Thank you for your generosity, Buggy. See you on the platform. Zoro said, as Buggy finally realized. Nijiwara and Urano. What's wrong with you, Moji? Go get their ship, now. Buggy barked after he punched his second mate. The clown rushed to the plaza where Alvida was. Smoker was having a good day so far. A good day until one of his subordinates told him that the ex-Shichibukai Jin was spotted, and that he was with Demon Jin. Not only was that problematic, as one was a captain, and the other was a first mate, but he remembered when he heard a report that Jin had a new captain. Whatever that monster, as there's no other word to describe it, as Jin was at the very least their second strongest Shichibukai after Dracula Mihek, could be the captain of a monster such as Jin. The only thing he wished to be is Captain Smoker, sir. There's confirmation of Jin's current captain. He's a teen who's wearing a straw hat. One of the Marines said before he sighed, and he has some heavy weight with him, Urano is Oro. The Urano is Oro, and the Jinbar with him. Smoker asked the man who nodded, who told you that? Lieutenant Fullbody, sir. He replied. Smoker clicked his tongue in annoyance. He's seen Mihek not too long ago, and he was content, saying that he found a worthy opponent at last. This is problematic. Assemble everyone. Smoker said seriously. Everyone? He asked, and Smoker's forehead veins popped. Everyone. He barked, and the soldiers scurried to get everyone assembled. And then Tashigi got in. Smoker gave them a serious look. Alright, some of the strongest pirates in this ocean are passing here. Try to capture them, and if you can't, flee. Do not engage if you know you'll die. Hi, Captain Smoker. Everyone assembled saluted, as they prepared their gears. Tashigi? You're okay? Smoker asked, and she gripped Shigure. Zoro was mocking me. Tashigi said in a low voice, but his aura was strong. Strong? How? Smoker asked, and she gave him a terrified glance. Do not fight him strong. She replied seriously, Captain Smoker, be careful. I won't die. He replied calmly. The execution platform. Luffy kicked the sneaking Kabachi down the execution platform, his sandal almost sticking on the man's ass, as he grinned. Alvida laughed, as a green-haired man was close to her. Boogie's eyes were dangerous, as he shot at Luffy, his sword was raised, not minding the darkening sky. I'll kill you, flashy bastard. Boogie yelled at Luffy, who was unmoving, yet he grinned. I'll be the king of pirates. Luffy yelled at the top of his lungs, as Yamato, Zoro, and one Bartolomeo, Smoker, and even Alvida were shocked, as right after that, when Boogie was on the platform a bolt of lightning struck Boogie down, immediately setting the platform on fire, much to the shock of everyone. Smoker slapped himself, Bartolomeo vowed to follow Luffy to the end of the world, and Zoro. The pirate hunter was laughing his ass off at the sight. Oh, this was hilarious. Yamato preparing to transform was all he needed to confirm also, he saw Bartolomeo and Alvida smirking at Luffy approvingly. Zoro, do you believe in God? Yamato asked the green-haired man who shrugged. No? He answered, let's get out of here. Luffy then walked to Bartolomeo and Alvida, and nodded. Your man called Bartolomeo, right? Luffy asked the man who was debating following Luffy. Yes, and? He asked, and Luffy grinned at him. Take care of Alvida. He said in an advising tone, and the woman nodded dumbly at that. Well, can I join you? Bartolomeo asked Luffy, who grinned. Let your power first, then we'll talk. Water 7, Fishman Island or the New World, here's my number. Luffy said, as he gave the rooster-looking man a slip of paper, in which he wrote his number. Take care, and set sail. Luffy grinned, as he dashed through the crowd with Bartolomeo doing the same, dragging Alvida after he covered her thoroughly. She needed to hide right now. After a few minutes of running, Yamato decided to stay, as someone had to carry Zoro to the ship. Zoro shrugged, as Tashigi was disarmed within a single blink of an eye, as he used his hockey-covered sword to disarm her with his terrifying brute force. Kill me, Tashigi said, and Zoro snorted. I have no reason to. Zoro replied calmly. Why? Is it because I'm a woman? She asked, and Yamato chuckled. No silly, because he has no reason to do it. Yamato said, as Zoro nodded. Why did you assume that I need no reason to kill someone? Zoro asked, and she was trying to think, only to fail. Besides, you're a good person. Why should I kill nice and decent people? Zoro's question made Tashigi think about it. Okay, let's get out of here. Yamato said, as Zoro nodded, and waved at Tashigi. Take care, Miss Marine. Zoro said, as he stopped, maybe next time we'll have a drink, and talk about the world or something. Boy. Who said I, and they're gone. She grumbled. Are you sure about this? Luffy asked Smoker in concern. I can kill you, and that's not because I want to. Luffy warned the man who shrugged. Don't get too cocky. He didn't even finish, as Luffy's fist connected with his stomach, making his eyes bulge out, as he vomited bile and blood. Same for you, Luffy said warningly. How? Smoker tried to move only for Luffy to smirk. Ask Monkey D. Garp for lessons. Then let's meet in Alabasta or something. Luffy told Smoker, who tried to move. Won't you kill me? Smoker asked, and Luffy chuckled. Why should I kill anyone? Also, you're a decent marine, and a good person. Luffy said, as he flickered his jaw before he carried him to an alley, before he put his body gently. Better luck next time, Smoker. Luffy said, as he remembered how no. He will make him a much stronger marine. Their sacrifice shouldn't repeat itself. Pirate King, huh? Not a bad dream at all. Dragon said, smiling at Luffy, who nodded. I agree. Is Sabo doing well? Luffy asked his father in a neutral tone. Dragon nodded. Well, tell him to meet me about 2 weeks later in Alabasta. Why am I feeling that it would be the most interesting of places? Dragon asked Luffy, who shrugged. Your grandpa gave me your number, but I never reached you. Because I will put the device on later, Luffy replied, and Dragon found himself laughing. Shishishi. You're still the same Luffy I remember. I'm sorry if I wasn't always around, Dragon told his son, who smirked at him. It's okay, oh shit. My friends. Luffy panicked as Dragon waved at him. Worry not, son. Dragon said before Gale deposited all of the still ashore straw hats on the Going Merry and accelerated the ship beyond the reach of any marine. Go Luffy, and show the world your answer. Dragon was grinning with pride. What are you talking about? Smoker asked Dragon, who smirked at him and disappeared. Reverse Mountain. After the straw hats shattered the barrel into pieces, they steered their ship to the strong currents of the Reverse Mountain. Yes, all the four oceans have a place where a giant canal ascends a mountain before they collide, and finally pour down on the Grand Line, or rather, in paradise. And boy, was their ascension the hardest. From Jin trying his hardest to steer the ship, to Yamato catching Luffy, who used his own body as a balloon in order to protect their ship, to Yamato who was catching her captain, to Nami who was barking orders. It was chaotic, and yet it was their hardest time at the Grand Line. Most pirate crews die in this very few minutes, and Luffy vowed to survive until the end, without losing a single person this time. And then, they were shooting upward, as the four currents collided. The ship was flying, and, as it was about to land on the mountain, Luffy finally started his first usage of his devil fruit, well, second. Gomu no Taiho. Luffy screamed, as he named his technique Great Cannon, and for obvious reason, and its recoil was enough to push the entire weight of the ship into the current. Jin smirked proudly, as he, Yamato, and Zoro were in a place each just in case. And, as they were going down, a booming voice was heard. You what? They're still alive. Luffy replied to the voice, as they raised an eyebrow. Only one survived. He screamed again. Another bellow earned another answer. No, he couldn't come back, as his shadow was stolen. Can you move aside? Luffy screamed, as they saw a black mountain moving away, making the entire crew shocked. Thank you. I will tell you more later. Let the ship stop first. Luffy, what was that? Nami asked her captain, who shrugged. That's a friendly whale that can understand our language. Nothing to see here. Luffy said, and Jin and Yamato shrugged. There was weirder, as the others, well, only Zoro knew that. Fourth time Zoro tells Luffy, who nodded. Yeah. He replied cryptically. Then Laboon, the whale, bellowed slowly. Only Brook survived, but he's stuck. That was due to his devil fruit. I'm Luffy, nice to meet you, Laboon. Yes, I will find him within a few months at most. Luffy yelled before he gave the crew an incredulous look. He wants to join us. Zoro was shocked. That was too much even for him. 3 eye blinks from all the present straw hats were all the sound there is before. All of the straw hats sat in a perfect synchronization, making the Titanic-sized whale boom, roaring louder than an explosion of any lightning, deafening booming rumbling thunderous burst of laughter, that made everyone on the ship plug their ears. Then, what could only be described as a grin, Laboon beloved again. Ha. You will be of use. Of course you are, it's just that you're too big to come. Luffy replied. Laboon made a sad noise, even if much, thankfully, volume than usual. Oh come on. If you join my crew, then I must protect you from the Sea Kings, and I can't swim. And Laboon bellowed again, much to the dismay of the crew, only for Jin and Zoro to give them some earplugs, leaving only Luffy. I have no idea how he can understand the whale. Jin said, as he shook his head. He can hear the voice of all things. Zoro and Yamato replied in unison. Zoro gave her a shocked look. How do you know, right? I remember, Zoro snorted. Of course Yamato of all people would know. I know that you're strong. It's just that Sea Kings does require hockey at the very least. Another bellow. Yo well, I am a bad teacher. Luffy admitted, but we better try. He said, as his eyes widened. Laboon. Move, as much as you can. Luffy said, as he jumped on the thrashing whale. Wait for me. Anchor the ship, I'll catch 2 schmucks. Luffy said, as Zoro palmed his face. The oars. Zoro said, and soon, Yamato, Jin, Sanji, Jin, and Yusaku had to row the ship to safety. And then, after anchoring Merry, Zoro looked at Usopp. Usopp, can you be kind enough to repair the ship, as best as you can? Zoro said grimly. I am neither a carpenter nor a shipwright. Usopp started to object, and Jin sighed in defeat. Fine Usopp-kun, I'll help you kid. Jin replied, as Usopp gave him a dirty look. Jin was looking amused by that. Zoro, what are you thinking? We should have never let our captain Nami start to object, as Zoro sighed. He's fine. Luffy is terrifyingly strong, and unless we fight an admiral right now, nothing can be dangerous here, can it? Zoro asked Nami, who nodded. Meanwhile, at the end of paradise, 2 old men and an old woman sneeze, as well as 3 middle-aged men. You forgot the 3 admirals, and 2 powerful elderly vice-admirals, and the fleet admiral himself. Jin asks Zoro, who palmed his face. What are we supposed to do? I must get stronger than them, and soonish. Zoro panicked, as Jin reminded him. Isn't it stronger than them? Yamato asked, and Zoro sighed in relief. Well, if Luffy can beat his grandpa, she asked, and Zoro snorted. You're right, and I'm the king of hell. Zoro replied only to meet the other 2's eyes of being totally deadpanning. What? You are? Jin said calmly while Yamato a bit louder, and Zoro sighed. He still remembers a nigga, boy. I don't have either Enma nor Shusei. He reminded them only to meet two shrugs. You have two swords to upgrade, and one of them can rival Mihek's, remember? Yamato remembered, as Jin nodded. Thanks, Ni-chan. Zoro smirked, as she blushed. Boy. I am not Luffy's girlfriend. Yamato barked at him before she added mentally, yeah. Oh? So you admitted that you like him. He smirked, as she gaped at him, and Nami felt a bit disappointed. SHSH shut up. Come here so I can, Yamato yelled, as she chased Zoro around, and the swordsman was grinning like a total idiot, and her smiling face was the only indication of no animosity. Sanji, don't even think about it. Jin warned. The chef slumped down in disappointment. But I think that this is the perfect opportunity to tell you about. Inside Laboon's stomach, incapacitating Vivi, and Mr. 9 was easy for Luffy. All he had to do was to bash their skulls together, crush the bazookas after unloading its shell, and go to Hanajiji, and so, Luffy dragged the two knockout cold schmuck, which is a huge indication coming from him, all the way to the end of the corridor, where he got inside the stomach of Laboon. He saw an elderly man who was relaxing on a long chair in a beach. Luffy pinched himself with haki to make sure that yes, he wasn't dreaming. Boy. Asen. I think that you should take a look. Luffy yelled at the old man who glared at him. Luffy glared back. The old man continued to glare. Luffy's glare intensified. Who are you? The old man asked, and Luffy grinned. Luffy. You? The young pirate asked, and the old man glared. Luffy glared back with twice the intensity. The old man glared back. Luffy glared with a sharper look. I'm Crocus. The old man replied, and Luffy smirked. What do you want to do with these two? Luffy asked, and the old man glared, like an old warrior. Boy. Cut that out, Hanajiji. Luffy yelled at the old man who shrugged. The author wants this to happen. Anyways, about these two. I think that I have a lot of plans to do. Crocus started, as he took a deep breath. This kid's eyes are not normal. He reminds me of Roger, and Rayleigh. Crocus added mentally, these two idiots were trying to kill Laboon. I cannot let that happen to my news crew member, can I? Luffy asked, as Crocus' hands released the newspaper he was holding. Ha. Laboon accepted to join you. Crocus asked, what did you offer him? I offered him a chance to find his friends, which I think I know one of them. Luffy replied, and Crocus laughed his ass off. Ha 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 ha. Kid, are you a time swimmer? Crocus asked, and Luffy's eyes widened, as he sweated, and looked at the two. Worry not. I know about that phenomenon. Crocus replied, as Luffy sighed in relief. Look, do not tell this to any soul, please. Luffy asked Crocus grimly, and the old doctor's eyes warmed up. How can I? Crocus asked, as he steered the ship to Luffy's location on the gate that's marked, exit above it. Hop here kid, I'll give you a ride outside. Crocus said, as he felt that Laboon was surfacing this time. Luffy blinked twice, as he saw that the entire place was painted with a skyline. Laboon is a cyborg. Luffy asked Crocus before he palmed his mouth. The elderly man smiled however kindly, as he nodded, and made a 50-50 hand motion by opening his palm, spreading his fingers apart, and twisting it twice to the left, to the right, then again the same motion. Well, 50-50 you can say that he's a cyborg, and that I made some modifications on him, so I can administer the sedative shots Crocus said, as Luffy felt that Vivi, and Mr. 9 started to stir, only to use a burst of his haki, focused at the two of them. Vivi however was unaffected. Oh? Do we have a strong-willed person? Luffy asked, as he licked his lip, making the still groggy secret princess tremble with fear. Don't worry, oh fair maiden, I will take care of you. Luffy said, his grin was anything but friendly. Meanwhile, Yamato stopped chasing Zoro before she gripped her kanabo, making the swordsman stop at his track, and give her a questioning look. Why do I feel the urge to kill someone, and bash Luffy into submission? Yamato asked Zoro, who snorted before he laughed his ass off. Jealousy sense. Zoro teased, and she glared at him, making him flinch. She was dead serious, my bad. Oniheim. Zoro replied, and she glared at him, I mean Oniohi. She smirked at him, her teeth became fangs which meant, Luffy. You better have a good damned reason. Yamato yelled, as she used a strong burst of her haki, as she swung her kanabo at speeds that produces a bloody hurricane, before she took aim at the red line, and shot, with her haki. Holy. Yamato, what the fuck are you thinking? Zoro asked, as he saw how she made a good dent in the mountainous continent. It is not time yet. Oops. She said sheepishly, as Nami, Nijiko, Usopp, Jin, Sanji, Johnny, and Yusaku stared at her in utter shock. Remind me to never ever make her angry. Nami whispered at her sister, cold sweat pouring profusely. Angry? Screw angry. If she's as upset as we are, we're all doomed. Usopp yelled, with Jin and Sanji nodding in unison. We agree. The chef and the ship's guard nodded in unison. Sanji. Jin asked the chef who lit his cigarette, but hummed at him, telling him to speak. Why did you give me a second plate? Because the first was paid by Luffy. Sanji replied truthfully, starving at the sea, no one should experience that. Sanji said grimly, as Zoro sighed. I don't see eye to eye with you, but I totally agree with you. Zoro said, as he remembered how he and his two friends almost died when they packed a little less than they should have. I never thought that you of all people have a heart. Sanji teased only for Zoro to glare at him. Don't push it, pal. Zoro warned, as he then smirked. Ever tried to meditate? Huh? All the non-Haki users asked in confusion. Jin, can you help me out here? Zoro asked his fellow time traveler who nodded. Jin at least trained his Haki the right way. He was forced to learn in order to be allowed to drink in less than 10 days. But to him, those 10 days where he was without a single drop of booze were like 10 lifetimes. I think that I can help out with this. So it goes like this: you close your eyes, and you sit down, and you try to focus on your own power within. Within each and everyone there's a power that lays dormant. Jin started only for Johnny to raise his hand. What kind of power? Johnny started. Are we talking about? Yusaku ended the question. The power to defy your own fate. To see what shouldn't be seen, to touch what couldn't be touched, to overwhelm the very odds. That power is called Haki. Zoro replied. Luffy calls it the mystery power. That's the worst nightmare for any devil fruit user, but he's the one the more advanced in it. And how are we supposed to know that? Sanji asked, and Zoro snorted. There's 3 types of Haki. The first allows you to see what can't be seen, the second allows you to hurt what can't be hurt. The third is rare, as 1 in a million rare, so far. Only I, Luffy, and Yamato do have it. Zoro explained, and Yamato palmed her face. Look, the first is called Kendenshoku no Haki, the second is the Busashoku no Haki, and the third is the Hashoku no Haki. Yamato explained, and Nami's eyes widened, as Nichiko listened. Observation, armament, and conquering kings. Nichiko asked, and Yamato grinned. It seems that the two sisters are smarter than they should be. Okay, for the first, it can be awakened in 2 ways, extreme focus or the need to avoid hits. The second is a heat of the moment thing, and the last is depending if you have it or not. Yamato explained. I know a few people who had it. Luffy, Ace, Zoro, Yamato, Whitebeard, Shanks, the other 2 Yonko, and a few of the rookies, and some Shichibukes, royals, and those who are high up the ladder, Jin replied, as their eyes widened. Those who have the deposition of a king or queen, or are chosen by the heaven have it, the fisherman continued to explain. Yamato stroked her chin, as Zoro shrugged. Why do we have it again? Zoro asked Yamato, who chuckled at his words. Maybe because I'm Oniheim. And you're Mao. Yamato replied sarcastically, and Zoro nodded in acceptance. The Ogre Princess, and the Demon King, huh? Seems like I just don't care too much for these titles, Zoro replied before his eyes widened. Usually the first mates of extremely strong pirate crews have it, so, yeah. Luffy is a very strong leader, so it was bound to happen. Yamato added, as the others gave them some odd looks. What? They say it like Zoro and Luffy knew each other for years. Asa told her, as she sighed. They did. Yamato replied. Well, you see, Zoro and Nikki, and Luffy and Nikki Yusaku started. Spent 2 years, and a few months training together. Johnny finished, and Zoro smirked at them. Do you two have a dream? The swordsman asked, and they nodded. To be the strongest tag team of swordsmen. The duo replied in unison, and Zoro nodded. They already said that at their entrance ceremony. Jin's was to see the end of the Grand Line, Nichiko was to see Nami's map of the world. Well, it seems like we do have a long journey. Zoro said, as he turned to Nami. There, you got 2 mooks hired. Happy now? Much, and I'm still pissed off at you, and Luffy for evading your debt. Nami replied, as she felt conned, deceived, ripped off, and even lied to. You said that you will pick my bill, and that Luffy can't spend more than 20,000. Zoro reminded her before he grinned. What am I supposed to do when I get both of these for free? And what can I do when Luffy learns how to bargain? And Nami unleashed a torrent of curses, earning a smug grin from Zoro. You're welcome. We did learn how to manage our meager resources. Nami didn't find a word vile enough to insult or curse Zoro with, making him smirk even further, with Yamato chuckling at her. Well, worry not, Yamato owe he to the rescue. Yamato said too enthusiastically, making Jin explode with laughter. You think that Luffy is stuck inside the whale or something? Usopp asked Jin, who shook his head. The captain is strong. Like overwhelmingly strong. I doubt that. Jin replied, as Sanji shrugged. Nah, he's definitely fine. Call it a gut feeling. Sanji replied, as Zoro smirked when he heard that. I'm really glad to see that, but for now. Training time. Zoro barked, as he gave Jin and Yamato a good look. You two know better than me how to do that. Instructing. Please, I always wish to be an instructor or sensei. Jin revealed, as Yamato smiled warmly. I think that getting stronger is my responsibility. Go, and execute your own duty, Zoro. Yamato told the first mate, who gave her a thumbs up, and gripped Wado, as he decided to train in one particular area he always wished to reach. I almost made you into a Kakuto. Wado, I will never allow you to be hurt, never again. Zoro thought grimly, as he gripped his sword tighter than ever. He focused more, and started infusing both Busashoku and Hashoku into it. 5 minutes after he stopped, the sword had become a black blade. The swordsman smirked. That's a start. Kurina, our dream will be fulfilled, but forgive me, it won't end up. I don't know how to say this, but I will make sure we do it this time. He was glad that none of his friends had heard him whispering to his sword, even if Jin and Yamato winked at him. Then he remembered something crucial. Mary. Zoro glanced at the ship with what could be said as sorrow, but he remembered that it almost sank with them on it. The swordsman gave it an apologetic look before he sighed. Mary, I apologize if you stopped. He didn't need any more words. None of them did to know, but Jin, Yamato, and Luffy, and that's all that mattered for now. Speaking of Luffy, Laboon surfaced, splitting the sea in two literally, as the Titanic-sized whale bellowed, as Luffy and Crocus got outside, with the knocked-out Mr. 9, and Vivi who was trembling in fear. As soon as she saw Zoro, she swam to him. And she clinged at him. Kenshi-san, please, keep that fiend away from me. She cried in terror, as Luffy grinned before he appeared right behind her. Zoro smirked, as she gave him two orbs that showed despair. Please don't tell me that he's behind me now. She asked, as the hair on her neck stood out. Yep. Right. Behind. You. He replied, and, as soon as she turned and saw Luffy, she jumped away in fright. Someone help me. She squealed/screamed at the top of her lungs, only for a pair of feminine arms to wrap around her. And she felt an immense frame hug her from behind. What did he do this time? The horned woman asked the blue-haired one. Her tone was too sweet compared to her hold, which was iron-like. He's scary. There's no other words that come to my mind. Vivi, still under the persona of Miss Wednesday, replied, as Luffy gave her a raised eyebrow. What did I say? I just called you, fair maiden, was it wrong? He asked only for Yamato to squeeze her, knocking the girl out, and you knocked Vivi out. Luffy commented only for Yamato to reply with a soft voice, a sweet smile, and her eyes were anything but friendly. LOLFFY, why don't you come over? HERA, Yamato chirped at Luffy, his haki screamed at him of the danger. Nope. I'd rather swim. Luffy said, as she chased him, and true to his words, took a dive, prompting Jin to save him from drowning. Yamato starred, as Zoro gave her a blank look. What? She asked with a bit of an edge to her voice. Poor Luffy. He commented sadly. She snorted. More like poor me. I give him my back, and he starts flirting with her. She comments angrily, I mean, what am I to him? Chop sashimi. She asked while grumbling, making the swordsman chuckle at the Oniheim. Heh, I dunno, Zoro replied, as he looked at Jin who was scolding Luffy. I guess that he's afraid of you. Zoro said, and Yamato smirked, as she saw the group's training despite being left alone, with Sanji kicking, as hard as he could. Say, you think that the idiot would have trained them well? She asked, and Zoro's eyes widened. Please, please, do not remind me of our time on his home island. Zoro shuddered. Garp was effective in his training, but also too brutal. I mean, his own grandpa once told me that he's becoming worried about his health. Worried about Luffy. I know he told me everything, Yamato said before she slapped her hands on her mouth. Zoro gave her a look before he shrugged. It wasn't his own story to tell. He seemed to have some feelings towards him. Zoro stated, as Yamato blushed, and he smirked. Well, Iroquois will eventually find a woman that'll accept him, with all of his qualities and flaws. But what if we fail? And why did you decide to come back? Let's just say that Luffy has liberated me. Yamato admitted to be stuck, and then someone helps you by freeing you, and even she stopped, as she remembered what Luffy had told her. I don't care if you're Odin or not, if you're Kaido's daughter or not, we're all the children of the sea, and you're Yamato. Our log keeper, Nakama, and the one who saved our asses way too many times. Luffy told his son Nakama to join. Why did you accept me on your ship after you refused at first? Yamato was indignant at Luffy's indecision. You wanted to get on my ship, as Odin. I wanted you to get aboard, as Yamato. Luffy replied, and she was almost unable to reply. So, are you in or not? Luffy's question made her smile, as she nodded. Thank you, Captain. She said while grinning, from ear to ear. We Nakama. You joining us is more than enough. Luffy grinned at her, from ear to ear. Oh? So you do have a crush on him? Zoro teased, as she put her hand on her kanabo. Better act before the other three or the crazy one would. Zoro warned her, as he went to Jin and Luffy's location, leaving Yamato to think on her own. Zoro was thinking meanwhile. Should he instill some terror on Baroque works, or should he just unleash a burst of Hashoku? That was a very important question. Then, he saw Yamato rushing at breakneck speed, Vivi under her arm, to Luffy before she stopped there. Zoro sighed, and after glancing at his captain, he decided that he was good enough. Now, what to do? Baboon would probably need to go back all the way here after meeting Brook. If he stays out of trouble, that's it. Zoro seldom said. Problem is how? How do we make sure, he asked himself before he drew a few plans. Before he sighed, where is Robin when we do need her? Zoro thought sadly. Oh right, she's working with Crocodile, and there's that. Luffy meanwhile decided to talk to Crocus, as he felt Zoro's turmoil. Zoro, I'll talk him out of this. As much as I want to, I think that Laboon's place is either here, or with a pot of his own. Zoro nodded at his captain who smiled at Crocus before he made his decision. I really, absolutely, utterly so want Laboon to join us. After all, there's no one better than him, as our friend, an underwater explorer, or battleship sinker. But you see, our journey will not be over for 2 more years something at the very least, and I'm always afraid about his well-being, Luffy said sadly, as Laboon bellowed at him with anger, but Luffy didn't budge. No, Laboon. I cannot risk your life. You're a friend, and it's the very least I can do. Laboon bellowed at him sadly, and Luffy sighed, say, how about we let you meet him, under one condition. Once you two meet each other, you dive down to Fishman Island, and wait for a pot of your own. Laboon bellowed lividly upon hearing this, or, it's for your own good. Besides, I don't want to hold you down. I know how you feel. You know in your heart that at least one of them is alive, and I feel the very same. I'd say they must be stuck in paradise, but there's a lot of sea kings. Luffy smirked at the reply of the Titanic whale, it's a deal then. If we find your lost friend, if they had escaped, at least 1 or 2 of them would have returned, and I do agree. I'll teach you the ultimate equalizer that's called hockey, and then you'll be the world's strongest whale. Luffy said, as Laboon practically smiled from eye to eye. Kid, how did you understand him? Crocus was in utter shock, as Luffy smirked at him. Voice of all things. Besides, what we told each other, Hana-san. Luffy smirked, as Crocus just laughed his ass out. Kid, if I didn't know, I'd say you're a lot like gold. Roger of all people. Crocus' words caught everyone, but 3 by surprise. Anyways, I'm pretty sure you guys know about the log pose and eternal pose, don't you? Luffy nodded, as he pointed at a now grinning Yamato. Never thought I'd find someone who's this prepared. Let's just say that being the king while losing your greatest treasure is not a good thing, Luffy replied cryptically, but now I can have it back. What do you plan to do once you conquer this Titanic Ocean? Crocus asked Luffy, who smiled at him. Don't want to conquer nor rule anything. Being the pirate king is being the one with the most freedom in the entire world. Luffy replied, I always wanted to be the pirate king, and then I'll be Luffy told Crocus, who had tears in his eyes, just like Yamato. These words Crocus said, as he added mentally, they're the same, as Roger he added mentally, while Yamato remembered, what seems like a lifetime ago, her encounter with Ace where he told her the exact same words that left Luffy's mouth. Any of you who dares to laugh at him, I will personally smash your skull. Yamato said angrily, her haki waving, however, only Zoro smiled enthusiastically. It seems like I was never mistaken to follow that rubber brain, Zoro said, as he was grinning. Never thought that he's this deep. Anyone who laugh at him. Now is the only moment you have to get the hell out of this crew. Why? Because these are the words of a child. Sanji asked Zoro before he shrugged. We know that he's both a childish person, and also a terrifying force of nature. All of us have a crazy dream at the very least for now. Sanji, I never thought that you of all people would snatch the words from my mouth. Zoro replied seldomly, well, let's get ready, our training will not be easy, and our journey will be hard, and we are not some kids playing pirates. If you're not ready to forsake your life, leave. Just leave here, get a log pose or something, and sail away. Bring it on. Surprisingly, it was Usopp who spoke first, if we must train to death or if we have to in order to live. Then we're all ready. Zoro smirked at the conviction that Usopp had. This is no longer a game. We may lose even our beloved ship. Jin warned again, and Usopp felt like he was stabbed in his heart. Losing Mary. That was, no? Lies. Lies. I don't want to believe it. Usopp replied, as Yamato gave him a sad look. Mary-chan is made to sail in East Blue. The sea will get much rougher, and this is called paradise because a ship that's not designed to withstand any crazy storm will be destroyed. Yamato said, and Jin sighed. I'm sure she's talking about a literal mountain of water. Jin said grimly, and she nodded. After their long conversation, Luffy decided to let Laboon join, begrudgingly, and barely, even, as a temporary member, he would always be a straw hat at heart. And even if he asked Crocus to join a second time, the old man passed the offer, saying that someone has to stay in the twin camp. Luffy told him that Laboon will come back for him, as he's been his only friend for 50 years, thus, the whale considers him his family. Crocus promised to live until then, or go to find an old friend of his eventually. Luffy smirked, as he realized who his friend was. Really Sensei. In Luffy's mind. Now however, he needed to contact Ace, to let him know that he finally reached the Grand Line, that he'll be in paradise for a while. And while the Den Mushi Yamato picked was strong enough, he doubted that Ace would pick up immediately. Hello you? Luffy heard the voice of Pineapple-san. Luffy said only for Marco to get a tick mark, and the urge to throttle Ace. Is this Marco asked, a bit irritated. Oh, I'm Luffy, the man who'll be the future pirate king. Nice to meet you. Luffy replied, as Marco sighed. Are you Ace's brother? Marco asked from the New World, and Luffy grinned. Isn't this his number? Luffy asked, and Marco sighed. Yes it is, but let's just say that Ace left a week or so ago. Marco said sadly. Luffy felt his heart clench. Boy, why did he leave? Luffy asked, as his features became grim, and Marco smiled warmly. Let's just say that he wanted to personally thank you for warning him. He said that he'll wait for you on Drum Island, then 10 days at least in Alabasta. Marco said, and Luffy grinned, from ear to ear. About damn time. How's Kaijin-san? Luffy asked, and Marco sighed. Byaji is fine, and what's this about Jin joining you? Marco asked Luffy, who grinned mischievously. Can't be the king without having the very best. Also, does Shirohige-san want to be the pirate king? Luffy asked Marco seriously. No, he wants to make Ace the pirate king. Marco replied, as Luffy smirked evilly. Then, he's the only Yonko I will not fight against, but if I win against Ace. Luffy asked, and then he heard the booming laughter of Whitebeard. Roar. So you're Shanks' bet. Say, how about you become my son? Whitebeard asked Luffy, who smirked at him. I don't know. I mean, I can't have any captain. Luffy replied, as Whitebeard smiled like a child. But, as an ally, I will tell Ace one day. However, keep in mind, I'm the one who will be the pirate king. Roar. You're just like Ace, and Jin described. Cheeky, fearless, reckless, exactly like Ace, said. Whitebeard added. When you come to the new world, make sure to call again. And Luffy grinned at him. Shishi, okay. Luffy said, as both changed simultaneously. What an interesting old man, Luffy said, as Zoro yelled at him. You were planning on throwing your own ambition away? Zoro asked dangerously, and Luffy shook his head. Zoro, if I throw it away, then kill me. Luffy said seriously, and Zoro grimaced at the words. Yeah right, that's exactly what he needed. Nah. Also, what's the plan this time, Captain? Zoro asked Luffy after he replied to him. At our crewmates, then either return here with Laboon, or he leaves us, and waits for us around here. Luffy said, as he nodded to himself. Pretty simple plan. Let me get this straight, you want to go all the way to the new world, then sail back to paradise, all the way, then get another route, and then again to the new world, and then to paradise, over, and over, and over again. Zoro asked Luffy, who smirked at him. And twice as much. Luffy replied, making Zoro look at him utterly dumbfounded. What? Nami wants to draw a map of the world, no. You don't even know how long the log needs to establish itself. Zoro barked at Luffy, who shrugged. Then again, the sooner she finishes her dream, the better. Yeah, Luffy said sullenly. Zoro caught the guilt trapped in his captain's eyes. Stop sulking around. Zoro barked at Luffy, who shrugged. What's done, is done. Zoro said, as Luffy thought. Say Zoro, do you think that Sanji still remembers the gnome Logis? Luffy asked Zoro, who gave him a shrug. If you want to know such a thing, then ask him yourself. Zoro said, as he chugged a bottle of sake. I have no idea what you are thinking, and I don't want to know. Do you think that Nami would be able to protect herself with the Loja? Luffy asked Zoro, who snorted. Knowing her? She'd want Enel's power, at the very least. Zoro replied, and Luffy smirked evilly. Oh no. Hell no. What did I say? Luffy asked, and Zoro snorted. You always keep a fruit on you. Like, you're ready to murder. It was a statement, not a question. Luffy, however, shrugged. No. It depends entirely on them. If they have good power, and accidentally die or do something really dumb, I will not hold back. I will protect them, even if I have to lose myself. Luffy declared, and Zoro was moved by his captain's words. You would do the same, no? Luffy asked Zoro, who smirked. So, now their lives are more important than you becoming the Pirate King? Zoro asked Luffy, who grinned at him. Exactly. I was a Pirate King, and I felt empty. No sense of accomplishment, no joy, nothing. Just the sorrow and guilt. Their dreams shattered, and our dreams happened, but was it worth it? Luffy asked Zoro, who sighed dejectedly. Pass me some sake. Here. Zoro said, as he gave Luffy something strong enough to knock anyone out. Nah, not worth the loss. Zoro said grimly, as Luffy nodded. Hey Luffy, you have a few seconds. Yamato asked, and Zoro went to Jin's location in order to help train their friends. By trained, he meant beating 10 tons of dirt out of each, and every one of them. Yamato, do you feel that we made a mistake in our refusal to accept our loss? Luffy asked the Oni, who shrugged. What are you talking about, Luffy? Our friends needed us. Do you suppose that being in the wrong time is an excuse? It is not. Besides, when you become the king of pirates this time, you won't have any regrets, no. Luffy grinned at the now smiling Oni before he realized something. Now that hope had returned to her. Luffy, do I have something on my face? Yamato asked, worried at Luffy's blank stare, as he approached her, grabbed her horns, and, huh? Yamato asked herself, as she had nothing to think about it properly, after what Luffy just did. Then, her mind came back, she glanced at him, fiercely, as always before she bear-hugged him, and Luffy practically melted in Yamato's strong arms. He had never expected that it would happen just like that. What he did earlier, he felt his body move on its own, but kissing Yamato. He never thought himself capable of doing so. Now however, that he got his crew back, and he has a solid chance to save each and every one of them. He felt himself brave enough to do anything he wanted. And he now realized something after the Oni released him, and grinned at him, from ear to ear, just like he did. You have the most beautiful smile I have ever seen. Luffy said to the now smiling Yamato. Thanks. I guess that I took it from my captain. Yamato replied, as Luffy grinned at her before he turned to Crocus, a now shell-shocked Nami, and Nijiko, the crying Sanji, a dumbfounded Usopp, a stoic, a smiling encouragingly Jin, a smirking Zoro, a stunned Johnny, and Yusaku, and a grinning Jin. Let's not leave them like that, Luffy said calmly, even if he felt something alien to him. Yeah. They never saw any couples kissing. Yamato asked herself only for Luffy to give her a questioning look, and ask her the one thing that made everyone, even Laboon, sweat drop. What's a couple? And then, most of them save Jin, Zoro, Jin, and himself, fell to their right side. Really? Boy, shitty captain, you know how to kiss a girl, but you don't know what a couple is. Sanji asked, as he grabbed Luffy's collar. Luffy swatted his hand by slapping his arm. How am I supposed to know? Jai-chan never explained. Oh, I think that I need to call Shanks. Luffy replied, as he nodded to himself. Now what was Shanks' number again? Do you need help with your current girlfriend? Oh. This is a mission for your friend and brother Sanji. Sanji yelled at the top of his lungs, as he pointed to himself the mission to help his captain. Sure, Yamato was gorgeous, but he doubted he would leave her being even the slightest upset. You're the best, Sanji. Luffy grinned at his chef who shrugged. It was the least I will help you by teaching you the 3 powers that focus on your leg strength, seeing as you specialize in kicks. It's good to know. Just please, whenever you are hungry, wait for me to finish cooking, and do not leave. On second thoughts, did you ever leave any food without eating it? Sanji asked his captain in curiosity, and surprisingly, even Jin, even Yamato, even Zoro, were looking at him carefully. Yeah, once. In Japan somewhere, they serve the most disgusting pies, that I would only eat if my life literally depends on it. Luffy replied, as he stuck his tongue out, believe me, even the dishes taste better, even the worms, even the dirt. You? They asked in unison. Their jaws reached their thighs. What was wrong with? Wait for us. We're going to. Luffy didn't move, as Yamato used her Hashoku to knock out Mr. 9, and Zoro smirked at Vivi who was about to flee before he gripped Wado. Sanjiroku pound ho, he said, as he unleashed a wave of compressed air at their small dinghy, obliterating it, and Luffy smirked, as he saw how each and every plane flew to a different direction. Only 36. Luffy asked Zoro in disappointment, and Zoro shrugged. Had to hold back, lest I kill them accidentally. Zoro replied, and Luffy gave him a cold look, his eyes were sharper than any steel. If you're any of our friends' lives depend on it, do not hold back. Same for you, Yamaohi, Jin. Luffy said seriously, we can't afford that. Luffy, with Nami, started only for Sanji to put a gentle hand on her shoulder. Nami-san, let's all not get involved. Sanji said, as Johnny and Yusaku nodded. Jin however gave his captain a thumbs up. Okay, let's get this show going on. Jin said, as Crocus smiled at them. Before they could say anything Mr. 9 and Miss Wednesday were at their side. Luffy saw a vulture and an otter, and he smirked. That would be a good opportunity for us up later. Say, can you please give us a ride to Whiskey Peak? Miss Wednesday said only for Yamato to nod. Luffy nodded. However, before that, Hanasan, wait for us, and for Laboon, will you? Luffy said, as Crocus sighed. Laboon, it's up to you, but whenever we'll be training, be listening. Luffy told the whale who grinned at him, and bellowed much softer than usual, thanks. Now then, onward to Sake Mountain. It's whiskey never mind. Jin finally said, as he gave up. On the high sea, Luffy sighed, as he had another vision when he used his Kenbenshoku no Haki to see the future, and before even Nami said a single word, he went to Zoro, and shook him a bit to awake him from his nap. When there was no response, Luffy flickered him in his forehead with Haki. What's wrong with Zoro started only for Luffy's dead serious glance to warn him. There's a storm arriving. Luffy said calmly, and then Nami screamed at the top of her lungs. There's a storm that will appear. Nami's yell made Luffy nod before he and Yamato furled the sails. Jin grabbed the steering stick, being the helmsman, and the others were ready to listen to everything their navigator would say, and say she did. Soon enough she was barking orders after orders, while Luffy and Zoro were the only two who kept their heads apart from the other 2 Grand Line veterans, if Yamato was a bit on edge, seeing as she didn't have the experience of Jin. And in the end, the entire crew was spent. Zoro approached their 2 guests, as he took a good glance at them, and he was smiling evilly. Who are you 2 again? He asked purposefully. I'm Mr. 9. He replied, as he started to sweat under the presence of the swordsman. I'm Miss Wednesday. She replied if a tiny bit calmer. Strangely, these code names seem familiar to me. Zoro couldn't help it. This was funny. No real names? He asked, as if he really wanted to know, even if he knew the answer already. No, our organization is Mr. 9 replied only to be covered with cold sweat. Well, our organization is a bit hush-hush. Miss Wednesday offered, as Zoro's grin widened. An organization that uses codenames. Where did I hear about this? Zoro asked, as he was practically grinning like Luffy or Yamato. Unlike them, it was a predatory smile. We don't think that you heard about it, Mr. 9 replied, as Miss Wednesday nodded. Are you sure of that? Zoro asked, as he tapped his chin, his smile never leaving his face. Luffy and Yamato glanced at his face, turned to each other, and smirked. They are not cruel enough to steal the fun from Zoro. Without saying a single word, they opened their arms, as the others were about to go to Zoro. Nami, listen. Yamato whispered only loud enough for the navigator to listen. Huh? She asked, and Yamato grinned. This was too good for them to miss. I think that the organization was called Brick's Fork. Zoro intentionally mispronounced, and noticed their flinch. Well, if the name does come to my mind, I will tell you. He said, as he left, making an Oni, and a captain too disappointed. Maybe I don't know the name. He said, and then he asked them, so, do you know who's the boss? And they shook their heads nervously. What makes you two? He snarked, as he went to the crew, only for Yamato to notice that Vivi, aka Miss Wednesday, flinching nervously. That was lame. Luffy frowned at Zoro, and gave him a thumbs down. Time is money. And they aren't even worth our time. Zoro replied, and Luffy smirked at him. What? Zoro, can you help me train a bit? I have a big knife to master. Luffy's question made Zoro snort. You're a schmuck. Zoro said only for Luffy to give him a serious look. Fine. That makes us even bigger schmucks. Thanks Zoro. I'll start my warm-ups, and then we'll talk. Do the same. Luffy said, as he went, and then, he came back to the center of Mary, and started lifting weights. Only set weights were the two side cannons of Mary. Zoro gave him a raised eyebrow before he shrugged, and started his own workout. Yamato grumbled something about the lack of weights necessary for her to start even warming up. Yamato-nichan, how much weight are you talking about? Nijiko asked the Oni who shrugged. Just 20 tons each arm. Yamato replied, and Nami, and Nijiko's eyes widened. What? It's barely able to be a decent weight. 50 tons? Jin asked, as the blood drained from his face. That's an endurance workout, but to train properly, I would need to lift 100 tons or more. Yamato replied, as now everyone save Jin, Luffy, and Zoro were too stunned to reply. Is this normal here? Usopp was the first to recover, ironically. Nah, here they'll be barely lifting a ship or galleon, but even so, Luffy isn't even warming up, he's just stretching. Look, she said, and they saw how Luffy was lifting the two cannons, in a jackhammer pace, and wasn't even breaking a sweat. I've seen him lift boulders that dwarfs Mary, what would that be to him? Is that all? Jin asked Yamato, as Luffy smirked, and put the two cannons in their places. It's just like I thought I'm still too weak. Luffy said sadly, they wouldn't be of use even if I trained with them for days. Huh? Nami said smartly, and Sanji was looking at him, as if he sprouted a second head. Zoro, how much more weight do we need? Luffy asked his first mate who signed dejectedly. A lot more than Mary can handle, I'm afraid. Zoro's statement sealed the fate of Vivi. To think we were driving them into an ambush, I will not fight them. Vivi said mentally, as Zoro and Luffy exchanged looks, and said something mentally before nodding. That will damage Mary. Luffy announced, and Usopp gave him a strange look. Something about looking a little into the future. Luffy, you can see the future. Sanji asked his captain who nodded. What kind of power would allow you to? He didn't finish when Luffy's head was at his ear. Kenbenshoku no Haki. Luffy replied, as he didn't want one of his stowaways to listen to his conversation. Depending on your affinity and training, you can reach that stage. That's neat. So, how exactly? Sanji started only for Luffy to add. Meditate, have a better sense of danger, dodge while blindfolded, every attack has an intention. Luffy replied, and Sanji smirked at him. Whenever I am not cooking, can you help me out a bit? Sanji asked Luffy who nodded, as he was smiling. That's the spirit. Luffy said with a huge grin. Zoro, can you help Sanji out a bit? Heh, better already. Zoro asked Luffy who flinched. I was talking about your preparation. Now then, let's start by. The two were madmen. Nami concluded. There's no other way to describe their sparring session, as Zoro and Luffy kept going at it for hours. Yamato really wanted to join, but she figured out that Luffy and her strength would definitely leave them stranded in the sea. Zoro at least has some subtlety while training. So far she felt bad for not training like the two monsters known as Luffy and Zoro. She owed them, especially the first, that, and more. Thanks for showing me the most basic of what I needed. Luffy grinned at Zoro who smirked at him. Yamato was training by attacking with her kanabo, slowly, and with as little force as possible. Sanji was trying to kick the very air, Nijiko was meditating, then Nami was taking turns. Jin was the only one who was not training on his own, and so was Johnny and Yusaku, and Jin was spinning his tonfas at breakneck speed. How far is the Sake Summit? Luffy asked Miss Wednesday, secretly known as Vivi. It's Whiskey Peak. She yelled, as her teeth became squealing-like, and we're not very far now. She said, as she put an air of dignity. Luffy however smiled, as he saw her new royal-like aura. You're not a commoner, are you? Luffy whispered only loudly enough for her to hear. I think that there's a list of lost princesses and queens. So, he's the lucky guy you fled with to elope together. She yelled at the top of her lungs, and Yamato, his hearing was the sharpest, heard each and every word. LOFFY, I have something to tell you. The Anahem chirped at him, and he was covered with cold sweat. Let's keep it for later. Luffy offered only for her to literally snatch him, and walk away to the back of the Mary. Soon enough, they heard some cry of pain, leaving one Zoro laughing his lungs out, and Jin shaking his head, even if he was smiling. Looks like our captain has some girls' problems, Zoro said, as Sanji snorted. At least he's lucky enough to have a girlfriend, Sanji said, as his lighter didn't work until a while later. Well, to each their problems. Jin offered to Yusuf now remembered something very important. Excuse me, I have to go now, Yusuf said a bit too shyly, as Nami grinned at him. Make sure to say hi to Kaya for Emi. The navigator teased the sniper who was now red as a tomato. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time, till then sayonara.